יישמע בערי יהודה ובחוצות ירושלים עוד יישמע בערי יהודה ובחוצות ירושלים כל ששון וכל שמחה כל חתן.
First of all, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. And of course, we know that today is the yortzait of Ramchal, Moshe Chaim Lutzako. First of all, I want to shiur tonight on Ramchal's yortzait. I want to dedicate it to Yehuda's Bas, Rabbi Shlomo, and also Aryeh Leib and Shmuel Zev. To both of those, the schus of the shiur, that you give them both an aliyah's neshama. First of all, when I speak tonight, I'm going to probably, again, it's my custom that when I speak, because this shiur is also intended for larger olam, I will probably translate many of the Hebrew words that I use. So please, it's no offense to you people, if you're yeshiva guys, you wouldn't have to do that, but the audience for this shiur is a little more extensive and so on. Tonight's shiur is not an easy one for me to say. It's not. It's not an easy one, and it's, I just hope that I'll be honest with you, and without being presumptuous, it's not going to be easy for some of you people to handle it, period, and so on. I believe that what I'm going to say is absolutely true, but it's one of those things that are true, but you know something, you don't like to necessarily say it too deeply and so on, although one day it will become very obvious to all. What we're looking at over here, okay, well, first of all, I think this is the 30th year that I'm giving a shiur on the yortzait of Ramchal. So, Kanai Nahara, I've been zoicha, to give this shiur for 30 years, and so on, and hopefully 10 year boo, I can give it till I'm 120 years old.
Amen.
So, maybe. Maybe by the time I give the last shiur, the Mashiach will have arrived, and then he can give the shiur. Kind of get me off the hook, in a certain sense, and so on. The reason why I give the shiur in terms of the Ramchal, I mentioned this a number of times. The Ramchal was my Rebbe, but I was most influenced by his hashkafa. We all know the Indian from the Ramchal. We know about him. What the Vilna Gaon said that he would have walked. The Vilna Gaon said he would have walked from Vilna to Padua to learn from him. This is not a poshut thing and so on. And he once said something, I'm not sure exactly what that meant, but Ramchal reached a madrega in Yediyah, which is one of the greatest madregas Yediyah that a person can have. And the Ramchal himself once said that I have been zocheh to know 1/2 of what the Ari knew. Which, if you know anything about the Ari, was an amazing statement. But he was nifta very young. He was only 40 years old when he was nifta. Some say because he's buried next to Rabbi Akiva. Some say that fundamentally he represents the first 40 years of Rabbi Akiva, who basically was, they call him an Amoritz, but he's more like a teenage Yiddish. But whatever the situation is, so the Ramchal made up the 40 years of Torah that Rabbi Akiva was not involved in, and so on. What's the topic for tonight? Okay, the topic tonight really is two things, and so on. The topic tonight really is we know that the Shekhinah went into Golus. We know that the Shekhinah goes into exile, just like the Jews, because we know from the pasuk V'shav Hashem Meshvuscha, and Chazal say it should say V'heshiv Hashem Meshvuscha. It says V'shav. So from there we learn out that the Shekhinah, but the Shekhinah itself goes into Golus with Klal Yisrael and so on. Now, fundamentally, when the Shekhinah goes into Golus, the Shekhinah is fundamentally the presence of the Rebbeinu Shalom, the presence of God in the world. Okay, it is not God. We know those who study Kabbalah, it's the sphere of the Malchus and so on. But basically, it represents the presence of God, of the Rebbeinu Shalom in the world that we see and so on. And we know the Shekhinah goes into Golus. The question is, what does the Shekhinah look like in Golus? It's a very strange question. The Aramaic is Shekhinah Begalusa, But I know what everyone thinks, well, what does that look like? Well, we cannot know what the Shekhinah looks like in Golos because the Shekhinah is something that really cannot be comprehended. But what can be comprehended is the Indian of Torah. Because the Madreg, or the level of Torah that we have, which appeals to the conscious mind, the understanding that we have, and our ability to see the yichud, or the unity of God, okay, comes from the Shekhinah. So the question is, what does the Torah look like when the Shekhinah is in Golus? As opposed to what does the Torah look like when the Shekhinah is not in Golus? This is a very, very important thing, and what it points to basically is the concept of what? That when the Shekhinah is not in Golus, and it's completely in its appropriate form, we're talking about the Nun Sharei Bina, or the 50th gate. Okay, we know that there's something called 50th gates of wisdom, Nun Sharei Bina, and the 50th gate already reaches the madrego, or the level already of the Ov Mashiach. When you reach the 50th gate, you're already looking at the world, you're looking at the Torah in its 50th the gate, which is the highest level possible. Let's talk a little bit about the concept of the 50th gate. What is that? Can we understand what this is? And I'm going to give you an interpretation of what that is, okay? I'm going to try and explain, if I can, fundamentally, what does the 50th level of Bina look like? What does the Ov Mashiach look like on some level? I'm not saying, I'm the last one to say that I am the Mashiach. I would never say that. But after studying this for many, many years, I'm trying to understand on some level, what does that look like? And so on. We know what we know that the light of the Mashiach does. We know what it does. What does it do? It accomplishes the main objective in Yeshaya, which says, and the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of God like the waters cover the sea, which means that fundamentally we will have an incredibly clear understanding of the Bnei Shalom. What does that mean, a clear understanding? Why don't we have a clear understanding now? And the answer is because we fail to see his yichud. We fail to see his unity, meaning we fail to see how his power is such that there is no one else but him, and how somehow his ratzon, or his will, dominates everything that happens in the world. Everything. It's called yichud shlitasoi, or the absolute unity of his dominion, or of his power. And so on. And we don't see this. Why don't we see it? Why don't we see it? So there are really two reasons why we don't see it. One reason why we don't see it is because many of us are angry at Hashem. We're angry. We don't see it. We don't want to admit it. But deep down we are angry when suddenly something bad happens to us in life. We suffer. Chas v'shalom, something bad happens to a person, to his family, his parnasa, his health, whatever the situation is. And basically, there's an anger, there's an internal anger at Hashem. Why is this happening to me? You see, and what this anger does, it prevents a person from coming close to the Bnei Shalom. You see, and because a person has no idea of why these things happen to him, what happens to him is that his emunah, or his belief in the Bnei Shalom, is weakened. The other reason is simply this. It's very simple. We see many righteous people who suffer, many bad people who prosper and succeed. And that's the concept of injustice. The one thing we expect from God is that he's just. You see, it means he rewards righteous deeds, he punishes evil deeds, you know, and that concept of justice is a concept of fairness and equality and so on. But the world does not reflect that at all. It usually reflects the exact opposite. You see, so we have a sense that there's no din, there's no justice in the world whatsoever. And when we look at it this way, of course we question, some people question the existence of God, they question his goodwill, and so on and so forth. So the Ov Mashiach in the end will answer every one of these problems that we have. Like it says in Kahal, it says, V'al tova ne'elam yovoy mishpat. In other words, everything in the end will be explained. And from that we suddenly see his yichud. We see that he was always in control, A, and number two, he always had a kavanah, or a desire, an intention to do good. Whatever he does is for our benefit. And we don't see simply the bracha on that, we actually understand it. That's why the bracha of Dayan Emes, the true judge, will disappear. because we cannot understand, okay, that bad, suffering, pain, okay, what we call evil, is really invisible good. We can't make a bracha hatov yametiv, who does good. So Chazal say, so make a bracha at least that he's the true judge. But one day, I believe that the bracha of dynamics will disappear, and the only bracha left is that hatov yametiv, because everything that we thought was not good, suddenly we see clearly that it is good. But also we know very clearly and so on and so forth, what is that, how will the Mashiach accomplish this incredible thing of suddenly opening up the complete aspect, the derech, the complete way of God and His absolute unity and so on? How? And the answer is the light of Mashiach, the 50th gate. That light is an ability to see emes in such an incredibly great way that after that there's no question about who rules the world and where the world is going and what the kavan is, what the intention is. But what's interesting, we know it also says, O Chodesh al Tzion Torah, that this light of the Mashiach is an O Chodesh. It's a new light. 1 minute, 1 second. Why is it a new light? You should simply say, it's a better light. It's a clearer light. It's a stronger light. But that's not an O Chodesh. It's a new light. What exactly does that mean, that the light of Mashiach, or the 50th Madrei, the 50th gate, is a new light? And this is not pashut in this kind of sense, as if this light was never here in that kind of sense. And in some way, it's not even part, it's like almost this light, the 50th gate, is so far beyond what we can comprehend, okay, that it's almost like we can't even consider this part of the Torah itself. It's so far, it's like a new version, an upgrade, if you will, of the Torah itself. Then what does that mean?
You have excellent weight. Sooner you have time.
I think I'm connecting with someone else or something.
Just touching it.
What?
You're touching it.
Oh, I touched it.
Put it on.
Okay, just touch it. I have two questions. Two questions that I hope to answer. First question is on the Rambam. It's a question on the Rambam. We know that the Rambam wrote a book called, a sefer called the Monavuchim, the Guide to Perplexed. And he wrote this to reconcile Greek philosophy with the Torah. And the Rambam says himself that this is the greatest book he ever wrote. And the Rambam wrote the Mishnah Torah, the Rambam wrote the Pish Mishnayos, he wrote tremendous things. Okay, but he says that of everything I wrote, this is what they call in English my magnum opus, or my greatest work. Wow, it is. It's an amazing thing. That's how the Rambam testifies on himself. The Vilna Gaon comes along and says, the Rambam made a mistake, because the Rambam attempted to understand the way of Hashem, and he attempted to understand that in light of Aristotelian philosophy, or the Greek philosophy. And the Vilna Gaon said, what's this about? What are they talking about? We don't need that. We don't have to go to the Greeks to understand this. We have the Kabbalah. We have Ashkafa. We have the Kabbalah. We have a Masorah. We have a tradition from Moshe Rabbeinu that explains all these things. That goes down. We have the Zohar. You know, we have a whole different system called the Kabbalah, which attempts to answer all the difficult questions of human life and human existence. So what is the Rambam doing in Psalm? Okay. So this seems to be what it is. So you see here what the Vilna Gaon's time is on the Rambam. We also know that a couple of years later, I'm not clear exactly how much, a couple of years later, there was a famous person, Rabbi Shimon Kessin, I think it was one of the Balatosis, okay, had the Monavuchim burned by the Vatican. Because many people considered the Monavuchim, because it had Greek philosophy in it, and so on, and many people considered, you know, like something which is somewhat alien and so on. He was able to convince the Vatican, the Pope, to burn the Monavuchim among other books that the Vatican burnt, and so on. A short while after that, the Pope got so excited about the Monavuchim that he then burnt the entire Shas. He took the whole Shas and burnt it too. He put it on what's called the prescription list of burning all those from. And Rabbeinu Yoina, who was a Talmud of Rabbi Shimon, was so disturbed with this, he realized that the reason why they're not burning the Shas, because the Rebbeinu Shem is saying, you burnt the Monavuchim, nadach. The next you burn my Shas. Which means that the Rebbeinu Shem was makbid. He was disturbed on the cover of the Rambam. And Rabbi Yonah was felt so bad about it that he went to Eretz Yisrael, I believe, and so he wrote the Shiur Tshuva, he wrote the book on repentance, on Tshuva tone, on this, and he went to the Rambam's Keva, I think to ask for Mechila, for forgiveness, and so on and so forth. And I always had a kasha. Why does the Baruch Shem really so disturbed by the Monavuchim? Thought it does have Greek philosophy. Bottom line, it is based on Aristotelian thought. The Rambam says right, he says, in the Monavuchim, in the third chelik, he says, I now want to explain the Ma'aseh Makava, or the prophecy of Yechezkel HaNovi, not of Yechezkel HaNovi, in terms of what's called the mechanisms in the Shemayim, in the Ruchnistic spiritual world. That's what the Rambam says for them, and so on. And he says, I don't have a Kabbalah, I have no Masorah or tradition of what that is. So I'm going to borrow truth where I see it. And since I see that Aristotle and his metaphysics and so on and Greek philosophy is a tremendous emes, I'm going to use certain basic principles there and so on. You know, the Rambam was incredibly intellectually honest. I mean, intellectual honesty means that emes is emes, no matter what it is. So he'll take the emes and leave the bad stuff behind. I mean, you know, the Aristotle was a min, he was a non-believer, but that didn't bother Rambam. What the Rambam did is simply leave it behind and took what was good in Aristotle to use it to explain the Ma'aseh Makava. Okay, so so the fundamental question is over here. So the Baruch Shem, God is defending that. He's defending what? Answering what questions in the Torah, reconciling Aristotle and Torah, and he's defending the Rambam, who the Vilna Gaon says made a mistake. Like, what's going on over here? You know what I mean? Look, we're Machabit, we honor the Rambam because of Mishnah Torah. But the fact is, if you ask the Rambam, I would honor you for which book? He would say, you know something? The Monavuchim. You see it. And of course, many of the Rishonim had major problems with the Monavuchim and so on and so forth. So this is a very difficult thing. This problem not only exists with the Rambam, the problem all exists also with Ramchal. The Ramchal had the same problem. Why? What do we know? Do we know the Ramchal learned with Eliyahu Novi as a Chavusa when he was 18 years old? Not bad. You know? And he didn't even have a beard at that time. The rabbis of Venice, they couldn't understand or grasp, what is this guy doing? He learns with Eliyahu Novi, he learns with what? Moshe Rabbeinu, Matat, the Malachim, and so on, and the Neshamas, and so on. And he's doing it. The guy wasn't married, and he didn't have a beard. Wow, total sacrilege, like they would say. Okay, that's one problem, okay. But there's a bigger problem. The Rambam wrote a sefer called Sefer Goyen. I know people saw it, it's a book on logic. It's a book on logic that's fundamentally based on what's called the Aristotelian book on logic, the Organon, which is the first book in human history ever written on logic. It's incredible. I mean, Aristotle, Zicha had the mind of a Tana. I mean, you have to understand who this man was. One of the greatest heads in all of human history. And he wrote a book on logic, thinking correctly and whatever the story is and so on, and this and that. And what it was, and so the Ramchal wrote a sefer going, attempting to understand the logical methodology of the Aristotelian and so on, and applying that to Torah. So somebody explained to me. Eliyahu Novi starts to learn with a man who's playing around with Aristotelian logic. How do you explain that? This is Eliyahu Novi. He's Zoich the Gil Eliyahu, Gil of Neshamas, Gil of Moshe Rabbeinu, Matat, Malachim, whatever the story is, and what's going on. And he's writing a book called Sefer Goyen. Also, Daki Melitza, he's writing a book on poetry. There's not a yeshiva guy today that would begin to do such a thing. Some guy who wrote a book on Sefer Goyen, it would be benuda, he would be put in exile, he would be thrown out of yeshiva. If you catch a guy learning Sefer Goyen, I veil a doubt. If you see a baruch in yeshiva learning Sefer Goyen, you'd simply say to him, excuse me, there are other yeshivas that may be catered to this. We don't want you here. I have no suffix. And I'm not talking about the Organon of Aristotle. If you catch someone reading the Sefer Goyen from the Ramchal, you throw him out of the yeshiva. But you know something? You guys are obviously much firmer than Eliyahu Novi. Because Eliyahu Novi decided this is all right for me. How do you explain this? These are the two questions I kind of want to ask and so on, and attempt to understand what's really going on over here in terms of this. Chazal say something very interesting. Chazal say the following. If someone says to you, okay, Yesh Torah b'goyim al tamim. If someone says that the goyim have Torah, don't believe it. So the Chazal, I'm sure most of you have heard of it. In other words, if you say that the goyim, the non-Jews, have Torah, they don't have Torah. But if you say that the non-Jews have chokhmah, or some kind of wisdom, that you can believe. That's what Chazal say, and so on. Now, let's understand this Chazal. And we're going to go into certain things. This is not going to be easy in this kind of thing, but I notice I have to take a chance over here, and so on. What exactly is chokhmah? What is chokhmah? What does that mean that the Goyim have chokhmah, but we have Torah and they have chokhmah? I mean, honestly, you have to say, what is really the difference between the two? And so on. What exactly is the difference, and so on and so forth? So I want to talk a little bit about it, and I'm going to talk about things that none of you have ever heard of, okay? Because it's not your field, and you guys just don't deal with this kind of a thing, and so on. But let me explain to you what chokhmah is, okay? And I'm going to give you a very clear understanding what chokhmah is and what's the chokhmas hagoyim. First of all, what do they analyze? What do the goyim analyze? Well, let's say physics. Physics is nothing more than different events that happen in the gashmistic world, in the physical world. What's an event? It means there are certain things, certain objects, and there are certain interactions between objects that occur on a regular basis. That's called a physical law. You see what I'm saying? For example, there are certain things that produce pressure or temperature in different ways. And like one law is that the greater pressure that exists between two objects, the greater the temperature, the heat between the two. That's a law of physics. So physics, okay, which is the chokhmah of the goyim, attempts to analyze what's called, and it's a fancy word, there's a $2 word, but I'm going to use the word phenomena. A phenomena is a very fancy word that means an event. An event, for example, okay, an event. Okay, like for example, if I pick something up and I drop it, okay, then somehow this thing drops on the table. The table somehow attracted the plate, okay? I do that. That's called an event. I did something, it's called a phenomenon. So what science attempts to do, the chokhmah of the goyim, is to analyze all the events in the physical world. Motion, heat, okay, optics, or so on and so forth, electricity, nuclear fission. These are all the different events that take place in the physical world. And they try and understand them. So the essential aspect of what goyim look at is phenomena. It means things that happen, John. What do they want to do with that? What they want to do is they want to explain this. They want to explain why is this thing happening. They look at a specific event and they want to explain it. Now you understand, let me give you an example, okay, in the history of science, how the chokhmah of goyim works. And it's fascinating. It's fascinating because this is what Chazal mean when they say that the goyim have chokhmah. Take, for example, motion. There was a man in Denmark a long time ago, about 400 years ago. His name was Tycho Brahe, okay? And what he did was he was an astronomer, and he had a telescope. And what he did fundamentally was that he looked at all the planets, and he tried to plot where these planets were, okay? The 7 planets, the only 7 known at that time, where they are at each time of the year. So he looked at the planet Mars, for example, and he said, okay, Mars is this place in February, in March, April, May, and so on. He did that with all the planets, and it took him 20 years to do that, to plot all the planets, this, that, and so on. And he had a whole book, like many books, detailing specifically where the location of all these planets were at what time of the year. Now, if you went over to Tycho Brahe, who's a great Danish astronomer, and said, what's going on over here? What kind of motion is this? For example, Mars is here in February, and Mars is over here in August. Mazel tov. What is that motion? So Tycho Brahe would say to you, I haven't the slightest idea. I don't know. All I know is I mapped out where the motion is. How it moves, why it moves, I don't know. Comes along a Talmud of his, Johannes Kepler. And he sat down, okay, knowing some mathematics, and what he did was he poured over this information that Tycho Brahe figured out on planetary motion, okay, which took him 20 years to produce that, and he was machadish from this 3 laws of planetary motion. It's unbelievable, and so on. What took Tycho Brahe 20 years, he did much, much quicker. For example, what are the laws? For example, simply, he understood that when he wanted to describe the motion of the planets, what do we think? We think that the sun is in the middle, okay, and let's say the planet Mars revolves around the sun. And that's what happens when you look at Mars across the sky. What's really happening is Mars is going around the sun. And as you look at it from the Earth, you see it in certain positions. But what he said amazingly, that Mars going around the Earth in what's called an orbit is not a circle. No, it's not a circle with the sun. It's an ellipse. Now what is an ellipse? An ellipse is like an egg. It's oval. So the journey of Mars around the sun is like this. It's incredible. You see how he was able to figure that out. And mathematically, he described the exact motion. It's because of the laws of Kepler that we mamish can predict where Mars will be at any point in time. So that's how we can send a rocket ship to Mars. Because we know where Mars will be at any point in time, we send a rocket ship to that place, you see. So if it takes 2 months for a rocket ship to get to Mars, okay, we see, well, where will Mars be in 2 months? And we send the rocket ship over there. Even though Mars is here, in 2 months it's going to be here. So we don't send the rocket ship where Mars is now, because Mars is moving, it's going to be here. Okay. Now, if you went over to Kepler and you said to him, you know, I hear what you're saying. Kepler created 3 laws in describing perfectly planetary motions. And you said to him, why do the planets move like that? 1 second. If you move around something, right, you go in a circle, azor, like this. What's this thing with an ellipse, like an egg? Like, what's going on over here? Kepler would say to you, I haven't the slightest idea. I don't know. I don't know. Later, a short while later, there comes another great scientist, one of the greatest of them all, Sir Isaac Newton, one of the greatest heads in the human species. And Newton says, I'll tell you why they move like that. I'll tell you. So he said it's because of a force called gravity. You have 2 objects, okay? It's invisible. You got 2 objects, okay? And you have to have patience with me. I'm not giving you a course on physics. I apologize. We'll get back to the term in a second, okay? So if you have 2 objects like these 2 plates, okay? You don't realize that when I hold these 2 plates up, these 2 plates attract each other. You can't see the attraction, so that's why when I do this, why does it fall? Because the table and the earth is attracting the plate. So Newton says there's a force between objects called gravity, and because of the way it attracts and so on, then the planets move like an ellipse. And he was able to calculate this using a new mathematics that he created called the calculus. So, because of what he did, okay, and he made a specific formula, not only showing this, but describing exactly how big the mass is and the distance, he told you exactly what determined the force of gravity. That it depends on how big the objects are and how far they are from each other. So he provided a mathematical, quantitative way to understand exactly how gravity works. That's what he did and so on. What was the godless of Newton? Newton was able to figure out the motion of planets in 5 minutes, what took Tycho Brahe 20 years. You see it. Now, if you notice what's happening here, Tom, okay, first Tycho Brahe just looks at what's called the phenomena of planetary motion, the events. Kepler comes along and describes exactly what that motion looks like, but he doesn't know what it is. Comes along Newton and explains what makes the motion like that. That's called an explanation. Finally, if you went over to Newton, okay, and you said, here's a screw. He said, 1 second, why do 2 objects attract each other? If I want to move something, what do? I push it or I pull it. I have to have contact with another body to make it move. So how could 2 objects which are at a distance cause each other to move? Gravity, what is that? That's called action at a distance. It doesn't make any sense. So if you ask that question to Newton, even though Newton is, Newton, you understand something. You have to understand the man's godliness. From his laws, what he figured out, what he was allowed people to do is this. He allowed you to calculate the motion of a comet or Mars from now for the rest of eternity. What I just said? His mathematics and his understanding of this event was so unbelievable that you could figure out the motion of every planet, every star, every comet for the rest of time. That's what we're dealing with over here. This is not a partial thing. But if you went along to Newton and you said to him, excuse me, okay, let me understand, why could 2 things attract each other? You know what he would say to you? I don't know. I don't know what this is. All I know is exactly what the force is, that it depends on how big the objects are and the distance. Well, how this works, I haven't the slightest idea. Comes along the 4th one, okay, which is one of the greatest scientists of all time, unsere one, Albert Einstein, a Yid. The other ones, okay, he comes along and says, I'll explain to you how it works. And he comes up with a theory that they say is 100 years ahead of its time, and they all say, all scientists are moida. It is the greatest piece of machshava in all of human history. You have to understand. It's what's called the most elegant theory ever constructed by the mind of a man. You have no idea what that thing, you guys, like, is it better than a sugya? Is it better machlokes Rambam and Raavad? Not so simple. It's incredibly much deeper and so on. Nobody had a havmina of what that was. So what did Einstein say? He said very simple. He said something which doesn't make any sense. He says when you have an object in space, okay, like for example, they have this plate, okay? Nobody realizes that, but when you look at this plate, okay, it's surrounded by space. Now, what's the space? Does space have a structure? So you say there's no structure to space. It's empty. Wrong. Space, or what you call empty space, has also a binyan or a structure. How do we know? Because what's the shortest distance between 2 points? A straight line. No matter where you go, the shortest distance between 2 points is always a straight line, which means that there's something what you call emptiness has a structure of some sort. It's incredible. So Einstein said the following, that if you take an object in space, that object bends the space. It bends it. It twists it. It's invisible, but it twists it. So if you have two objects, they both twist the space between them, so each one falls to the other. They must fall because they bend the space into a curve and they must fall to each other, which is completely invisible. And he proves it and so on. I'm not going to go into this. This is not a course in physics. But fundamentally, it was mind-boggling. Now, when you look at this type of thing, this is Chokhmah. What Pshat Chokhmah? What's going on over here? Okay, what's going on is this. These people, Goyim, okay, what they analyze is something called phenomena. They look at actual events in the world. They don't make it up. I saw you this. When things fall down, okay, if you jump off the roof, you're going to land on the ground, whether you like it or not. So they look at it as some kind of an event. That's number one. Number two, okay, what do? They actually measure and they observe the event. Because that's the only way. They look at it, they measure it, they observe it, they experiment to figure out what's going on over here. And they develop a law of some sort, that this causes that. Okay? Then the next thing they'll do and so forth is what? Is they also explain it. I say, what does this mean to explain? What does that mean to explain something? To explain something means you understand why something is happening because of something else that's happening on a deeper level. So Tycho Brahe understood that planets move. Kepler understood how they move. Newton understood fundamentally why they move, using different concepts. And if you notice, each one is going deeper and deeper and deeper. And finally, Einstein comes along and says, let me explain you the why. And that's why in 1919, the articles in all the papers in the world said, Einstein dethrones Newton. That's how, what a machshava that was and so on. But you see, that's Chokhmah. You see it. Now, so therefore when we look at Chokhmah, but the Chokhmah of Goyim only deals with physical reality. It deals only with physical reality. Events in the world of Gashmias, that's it. But what they do to find out information, they have to observe, measure, and experiment. They don't have this idea. They're not born with the idea. They have to determine this from actual thing. Finally, which is the most important thing, what they're interested is to explain events, not haloimus, events, something which happens mamish in reality. That's what Chazal mean by Chokhmah. Now, you want to know how powerful it is, how effective it is? You want to know, like, where do they get with this? Well, I have bad news for you guys. You see this? That's a cell phone, okay? And you know what it takes to make a cell phone? You have no idea. I can ring the number of a man in China, and I can speak to someone in China, standing here and he's over there. How do you do that? How did they wind up? How did they figure this out? You use this all day long. But you have an idea, if I said to you, if there was no cell phones and I said to you, you go make something like that, you look at me like I'm a shigana, because it's impossible. But obviously what they did was they studied a certain event called electromagnetism, and they studied how electromagnetism moves, how it stops and so on, and they understood how to create waves in space and how to communicate, how to turn voice or sounds into digital information and then transmit it. These are things that you have no concept of, Tom. But how did they get to be so smart? How did they get to be so smart that they can do this? And the answer is because they studied certain events in reality and they figured out exactly how they work. They figured out exactly all of these things and they were even able to explain this. So that's Chokhmah. So we cannot undermine Chokhmah. Cannot. because their success is unbelievable in terms of biology, microbiology, where they can now see the actual structure of a gene, and they can play with that and so on, and they can change your entire genetic structure, and so on and so forth. And in terms of all the things, sending a man to they want to send a man to Mars. You know how they send a man to Mars? So you said, take a rocket ship, figure out where Mars is, and just send them. No, not enough energy. So what they do is they send the rocket ship to the moon in such a way that it goes around the moon like a slingshot, and then it shoots to Mars. They use one planet or one thing as a slingshot to get to another. You have any idea the nature of the calculations of that? In order to figure something like that, it says, one said, in order to do that, that is equivalent to a pitcher in New York City, okay, throwing the ball, a pitcher in baseball, throwing the ball across the plate in Los Angeles with perfect accuracy. To send a man to the moon or to Mars, you have to have that level of accuracy. If you miss by a little bit, the man goes in outer space and he has a yontif somewhere in outer space, and that's about the end of it. That's the level of accuracy you need to get a man to Mars and so, or the moon. It's incredible. Now, I'm not here to be my shabeach in this, but we need to look and see what it is. Now, let's turn around now. It's mine.
Oh, it's yours? Yeah. Oh, so now you. How much chachma we have?
Now let's look at Torah. What is the relationship of Torah to Chochmah? If this is the Chochmah, what Chazal is referring to as belonging to the Goyim, what's the inyan of Torah? How do you compare this Chochmah to Torah itself? Number one, Torah has certain incredibly superior qualities. First of all, the Torah is not concerned necessarily with physical events. It's concerned with phenomenal or events that take place in all of creation, all of existence. So the Torah is talking about phenomenal events that take place in the world, and that take place also in the Shemayim, and takes place in all the olamas, all over. It concerns all the things which happen to Malachim and to Neshamas, and so on and so forth, to angels and to souls and Neshamas, where Neshamas go and so on, how all the world, the spiritual, relates to the physical world. The phenomenal, or the thing that Torah studies, encompasses all of existence, whereas the Chochmah of the Goyim only encompasses physical existence. That's number one. That's number one. But the Torah still speaks about events or phenomena. We don't, when you learn Torah, we don't learn it that way. But fundamentally, that's what it is, and I'm going to show you an example of what it is. Okay, like Nizikin, Seder Nizikin, okay? What's the central idea in Seder Nizikin? The central idea in Seder Nizikin, okay, is the concept of bailus, ownership. Now, what does that mean? Ownership, to own something, is a legal idea. I own this. If somebody comes over and steals that from me, what happens? If I don't catch the person, okay, it's forbidden. Why is it forbidden? Because the New Jersey criminal code says that such a thing is illegal. And if we catch you, you go into jail. That's a legal concept. So the New York State criminal code explains the concept of bailus ownership in terms of certain things. Now the Torah says also, lo signo, if you can't steal. What's the difference? What is the difference between the concept of bailus in the Torah and the concept of bailus in the New Jersey criminal code? What's the difference between the concept of ownership of bailus in the Goyim to that of Jews? And the answer is this. In the Goyish Welt, it's a legal concept. We say you own this, okay? We have a shtar to prove it. Now, if somebody comes and steals it from you, okay, what happens? What he did was illegal. Yeah, but how are you going to go? You got to go catch the guy and put him in jail or something like that. Otherwise, he got away with it. But in the Torah, that's not true. in the Torah, that's not true. In the Torah, when you own something, there's some kind of a real ruchnistic spiritual force that exists between you and the object you own. Except that that force is invisible. When somebody comes and steals that object, what's happening is he's actually doing something to the reality of your bias. Bias is not a legal concept. It's a phenomenon. It's an actual event. When you own something, there's a real thing, that there's a real kesher, or there's a real connection. Please, there's a real connection between you and the object. You see it. So if someone comes to steal it, then what happens is he creates a damage to his neshama and to the object. In other words, something real is happening. Whereas in the legal concept, nothing is happening at all, except if you catch the criminal, you put him in jail or whatever have you. But in the case of Torah, you don't have to catch anyone. The person, because he did that and went against the Torah, what happens, he now has damage, he puts what's called a pagam, or damage, in his neshama. So I don't care if you catch him or not. There's a mark of damage on him. So all the halachas of the Torah, when you see them and look at halachas, you say these are laws. But these laws are not like the laws of conventional society. Because those laws are simply agreements between all of us, what should and should not be done. But the Torah laws are laws that have to do with some things that really exist. That's a whole different concept, and so on. So therefore, the Torah also has what's called phenomena or events. Just like physics studies electromagnetism, when you learn Ezekiel, what you're really studying, whether you realize it or not, you're studying the concept of bilis, the metzius of bilis. Each one of the Siddurim has a central concept of a metzius, a reality. Ezekiel studies bilis. Nashim studies a special type of bilis, which is the bilis that a man has to his wife, and so on. And he produces certain types of inyanim, certain types of peculiar, specific types of properties. For example, where his wife is now forbidden to all other men. Why is his wife forbidden to all other men? Why can't someone? Why? Because there's something in the way a person owns the kinyan. There's something in the way of the bilis, or the ownership of a man to a woman, which has something called kedusha, which has some kind of a reality to it. So therefore, she is now forbidden to everything else. But it's a reality. It's a true entity. So Nashim talks about the special type of bilis called the married woman, ishus, zvoim. Zvoim also deals with phenomena and entities. What does zvoim deal with? Well, it deals with what's called matnas aniyim. Matnas means is charitable donations you make to what? To poor people and so on. But you have to understand something. This really is the concept of what's called collective ownership. The reason why you have to set aside a part of your field to give it to poor people is because those poor people in some way already have partial ownership of your field. In other words, other people now share in the ownership. That's called collective ownership, and so on. So we're dealing with a reality here. Moed. Moed is about time, about certain types of energies or shefa that come into time, you see. But these are real things. Kachim. What is kachim about? Kachim, to a large extent, is about karbonis. But what's the concept of karbonis? What is that? Karbonis, and this is not easy to understand. Karbonis is that if a person does a chet, he creates a certain type of a negative energy called zoyama. And because he doesn't want that zoyama to hurt him, he takes the zoyama, the chet, and he places it on an animal. He transfers the zoyama, or the metzius of the chet, onto an animal so that the animal experiences the pain of that chet. Well, so Kachim studies Zoyama and the way it's transferred. But that's like physics. That's like studying electromagnetism and seeing how it's transmitted and received. So Kachim is dealing with something which is a real metzius. Taurus studies Zoyama itself, Tumah. How do you generate it? How does it move? How do you eliminate it? But you see, these which to you appear as halachas are not simply halachas. They are the same type of events and phenomena which physicists study when they study gravity, electromagnetism, and nuclear forces, and so on. The only difference is what? So what's the difference therefore with Torah? Torah studies all phenomena. Everything, all events that take place in the physical world, in the ruchnistic world. All. So it's much wider than physics or what the Goyim study. 2. How do we learn, if we cannot see Tumah, we cannot see Tumah, we can't see Bilis, we can't see Kedushin Zman, we can't see these things. So how do we know what the halachas are? And the answer is, what? Mamid HaSinai. that the only way we know the phenomena or the events that take place in the world of Ruchnis and so on is because of the revelation at Sinai. Otherwise, we would never know. Physicists don't need a revelation. Why? Physicists, what do they simply do? Physicists study and experiment with the thing that they can see. The phenomena that we study in Torah cannot be seen, they're invisible. So therefore we need to abolish them to reveal them to us, to megalit us exactly what they are. So the method of discovery in Torah is through revelation or Mamad Sinai, and the method of discovery in science is what? Is experimentation and observation. But both study fundamentally the notion of phenomena or events that take place in reality. What about the results of Torah? What about them? What's the difference between something that happens in physics and the Torah? In physics, okay, if you make a mistake, you break your cell phone, you can't talk to another person. But in Torah, okay, if you suddenly do certain types of sins, if you suddenly what? If you break somebody's object, which he owns, okay, then what are you doing? Fundamentally what you're doing is you are affecting the entire Bria, all of creation. You are setting forth negative energy, spiritual forces that damage all of creation. Which means that the events of Torah, because it deals with all of creation, the entire Bria, are much more powerful than the events of physics. Okay, so I think we have an idea of the concept, the difference between Torah and Chochmah. When Chazal say, Yesh Chochmah b'Goyim, Chazal is saying the Goyim have the ability to analyze the phenomena of the physical universe. But they analyze it well. Torah, okay, what they're saying is, but they don't have Torah. They don't have access to the phenomena or the events of the entire Bria. We have Torah. We have this ability to study the events of the entire world itself. You see, so that's a tremendous shevach for us, okay, and so on. And that shows you a different aspect and so on between us and them. Okay. Now, I think everyone basically understand what I've said. I had to give a lesson, a shtick lesson in some aspect of physics, so you can understand the intellectual approach of the Goyim and why they're so successful. You see it. And this is what it is. Now for the bad news. Now for the bad news. Where do we see that we are mechuyev to understand the events that are inside the Torah? Where? Nasa v'nishma. What's the chiddush of Nasa v'nishma? The chiddush is that Klal Yisrael said Nasa. We will do even if we don't understand. But the Rebbe Shem says that's not enough. I want a nishma. I want you to understand what you're doing. Look, you need to do it in any case. But there's something called the nishma. What's the nishma? The nishma is the application of chokhmah to the phenomena of Torah, of Ruchnius. I want you to understand, the Rebbe Shem says. I want you to understand what's going on over here. Not stam just to do the mitzvahs. It's not enough to understand the Tayyag mitzvahs. I want you to not enough to do it. I want you to understand the Tayyag mitzvahs in terms of what are the events that take place in the Ruchnistic world that allow the Tayyag mitzvahs to be thing. That's what's called the Chokhmah HaTorah. Good. Is that choshev? Well, the Torah says. What does the Torah say about? What does the Torah say about Torah? Or what does the Rebbe Shem say Torah? He says, "Kihi chachmaschem ubinaschem l'ne'elamim." This is your chachma and your being in front of the nations of the world. So the Rebbe Shem is saying that this Torah that I've given you is superior to what the Goyim have. Why? Because it includes all events in existence. Okay, in that kind of sense, number one. Number two, the events that we took on Torah are much more powerful than the events of physical reality and so on. Okay, so this sounds great. Okay, what's the problem? The problem is that there are certain psukim now, there are certain psukim in Tilim and other places that give us major trouble. Like what? What am I talking about? And it talks about the concept of Torah or the Shekhinah in Golus. Something new has happened. You see, theoretically, what I've described Torah is what it should be. Okay, that's the Nun Sha'arei Bina, the ability to examine the phenomenon of Ruchnius with a clarity similar to the clarity that the Goyim have of the physical world is the 50th gate. Because when you understand all these concepts, okay, in all the worlds, you have an unbelievable chokhmah, and suddenly you see the hand of God in everything. That's what the nun is. Okay, what's the problem? Major problems. And I will speak about why. Number one, it says, Vayitein es uzecha b'shevi v'tif'atcho b'yatso. In the davening we say, Ad mosacha uzecha b'shevi v'tif'atcho. How long will your strength be in captivity and your beauty in the hands of the enemy? Excuse me. What is David HaMelech talking about? What is he talking about? What are you talking about? What is Tiferes? The word Tiferes means beauty. What is it? So the Vilna Gaon says that the word Tiferes means yichud. When you say a number of different facts and you do not see what's behind those facts, okay, and suddenly you see what is behind that, that's called beauty. When you connect facts suddenly and you see a picture that comes out of these facts, that's called beauty. That's really what beauty is. For example, if I take a jigsaw puzzle of 1,000 pieces, I have 1,000 pieces. I can't see anything. But if I take those 1,000 pieces and I put it together to make a complete picture, so that's what those 1,000 pieces do. That's called Tiferes or beauty. So Tiferes, and the Gemara says, Tiferes means yichud, because it says, Hashem echad u'shmo echad, Hashem is one and His name is one, l'shem u'l'tiferes v'l'sila. So Tiferes means hasogas yichudoi. It's taken to, you should know, even the detective has Tiferes. Sherlock Holmes, the legendary what? Detective in Arthur Conan Doyle's series, who was a tremendous British detective. What does he do? He goes to a crime scene, okay, and he picks out different clues. And he looks at all the clues and he says, each one of these clues is separate. How am I going to figure out who did it? How? So he sits and thinks, he thinks and so on, and he says, if I take this clue and I match it with this clue, they come together. Now, if I take the combined clue and match it with that clue, till finally he begins to build a complete picture and he discovers who did the crime. He puts together separate facts together and he brings it into a yichud, and from that and so on. That's the concept of Tiferes. To see separate facts, put it together, to see fundamentally the pattern or the structure that emerges from all of them. So what does Tillim say? What he's saying is fundamentally a trick. He's saying when the Shekhinah went into Golus, we lost Tiferes. It's now in the hands of the enemy. You see it. Which enemy? It's in the hands of Bova and Yava and Poras and Edom. That's what we lost. Because Tiferes and Oiz are two critical qualities of the Shekhinah. Oiz means success, power. It's the ability to succeed. If I'm connected to the Shekhinah in Oiz, it means whatever I touch is successful. If I buy a stock for $10, that stock will go up to $1 million overnight if I'm connected to the power of the Shekhinah. That's Oiz, strength. Tiferes is beauty. It's the ability to see Chokhmah. You see it. So what the Pasuk is saying is that when the Shekhinah went into Golus, we lost both Oz and Tiferes. That's why Klal Yisrael is under the heel of all the Umasaylam. Why is it that the nations of the world control us? Why? Because they have the Oz of the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah went into them, they have the Oz, the power, and they have the Tiferes. That's why the Goyim are so successful in their Chokhmah, because they can take almost anything in the physical world, examine it, and come up with unbelievable hasagas. Because they have Tiferes. And the Pasuk says in Tillim that on some level we lost it. How? But that's what it's saying. Number two, it says what? When the Torah talks, when Tillim talks about Klal Yisrael, it says, Mekime me offer dal, me ashpoi soim evyoin. The Torah calls us a dal and an evyoin and an onvi. Shabbos anim atotishva. What does that mean, poor? I know a lot of guys, a lot of Jews on here that are very rich. So when the Torah is saying over here that we're really poor, when it's referring to Klal Yisrael as aniyim, what is it talking about? It's talking about aniyim in their great precious treasure, Torah. It means when it comes to Torah, we are aniyim. Because the Shekhinah is in Golus, we are aniyim. That's shocking. Why? Because we are missing the Tiferes. We no longer have the ability to put pieces together and see the whole, the entire thing. These are psukim. These are coming from psukim himself. Finally, okay, the worst one of them all, and this is really a topic buster. Okay, the one of the worst ones of them all. It's a pasuk in Tehillim. B'machshachim hoshivani Hashem. Hashem placed me in darkness, choshech, kimesei olam, like the dead of the world. So the pasuk is talking about the study that I live in a cemetery. Klal Yisrael lives in a cemetery. Gewalt. And then Chazal, what do Chazal say that the pasuk is referring to? What it says is that the pasuk is referring to Talmud Bavli. Bad news. When the Tehillim talks about the Chokhmah of Torah Shabbat Peh, Chazal, this is referring to Torah Shabbat Peh and Talmud Bavli. That this is like sitting in a cemetery. So I say to myself, Gewalt, what does this mean? I don't want to depress you guys. I really don't, okay? But we have to understand what the Torah said, because even this is Torah. What are they talking about? So, based on what they're saying, and I'm going to explain this. I'm going to tell you the reason why it is like this. Why it is like this. So you understand precisely how the Shekhinah went into Golus, and why suddenly we no longer have the Torah which should have in the way it exhibits Chokhmah. Now, I'm going to take a Chazal and I'm going to add a Sefer to Chazal, which they didn't say. But clearly, they seem to imply this. If someone says to you, Yesh Torah b'goyim, al tamin. Don't believe that the goyim have Torah. Makes sense. They want it on Har Sinai. Okay? That they have the ability to understand Chokhmah and analyze Torah, tamin. Now, there's a Sefer to that, which Chazal never said. I'm going to put in what I think is the completion of Chazal, the Sefer. Okay? And there's a reason. It's this. Based on the Psukim. Im yoyim sheyesh chokhmah b'Yisrael al tamin. Im yesh Torah b'Yisrael tamin. Chazal don't say that. Chazal don't say what they say the goyim have chokhmah, but Chazal don't say about the Klal Yisrael. They don't. But what they're really saying when they say over here all these psukim, they're saying that something happened to Klal Yisrael, that we have Torah. In other words, we have the information, we have the MS, but we have lost Chokhmah. We have lost the ability to analyze the MS, to understand from this MS, okay, to go down to the bottom level of Hasoga Sichudai. We don't have it anymore. That's the Shechin and Golus. Why didn't Chazal say the second part? It's simple. Chazal had Rachmanis and Klal Yisrael. They don't want to be moitzin laz on Klal Yisrael and bring a bush to Klal Yisrael. But in all the other psukim, they seem to be indicating that. And the question is, why is that? You know, you look and says, what is it talking about? Why is that? Why is it Talmud Bavli? Why is there something that we sit and learn for 1,000, 2,000 years? Why are Chazal saying Kimei Su'ilim? This is like the Chokhmah in the cemetery. Because they fundamentally saying this and you don't realize it until you look at it. Let's look at the Gemara, okay? Let's look at the Gemara and so on. What exactly is going on? Number one, the Gemara that we have is from the Mishnah. It's a commentary on the Mishnah. You look at the Mishnah and we want to look at halachas. Let's say there's a machlokas tanoim on what? There's a machlokas tanoim on let's say for example on a certain union of gezela and so on. Well, the question is, well, who's right? Who's right? But if the union of gezela is a phenomena, if gezela is a real thing in Metzias, and there's a machlokas tanoim on what that is, it means that there's a machlokas tanoim on what the emes is, really. What the truth is and so on, Tovat, which means that whereas physicists can easily examine events in the world through experimentation, observation, we can't do that, because we rely on Torah Shabbat Peh, on Maimon HaSinai. But when there's a machloikis on these things, it means fundamentally the fundamental facts of the spiritual world, of the ruchniks, the world, are in doubt. There's a machloikis on that, on some level. So therefore, what we're doing is, we no longer have the facts that we need to what? To understand the pneumius of these ruchnistic events. We don't. That's number one. Okay. The second thing is, look at the Gemara. The Gemara, when it's written Aramaic. It's abridged. There's not one full sentence in Shas. Every sentence has a subject and a verb, and so. But most of the sentence is missing. Like it says there, for example, my timer, and that's it. So we don't. My timer what? What's the reason for what? The Gemara doesn't say anything. The Gemara talks about its halachas and so on in such a way as what? In a way where it leaves the sentences almost completely empty. We have to fill in the spaces, which means that we have to spend our time on what's called a literary analysis of the Torah. To us, learning Torah means learning Gemara is simply saying the following. What did he say? What did he say? What did he mean? What did he say? What he said and what he meant is not chokhmah. Why is this true is chokhmah? Why is the event true is chokhmah? When physicists study Newton, for example, his book, The Principium, they don't ask what did Newton mean. They know what Newton meant. But they want to know, is Newton right? Is the way he describes gravity correct? Is the explanation he's given for this actual realistic physical event, is it true? You see it. Whereas most of the work in Torah is not to understand what the event is in terms of truth. It's really to understand is, what did the guy say? What did the Amorah say? Half the Gemara is about what did the Tana say? The Gemara is trying to figure out what the man said. What the man said is not chokhmah. It's the analysis of a sentence. It's a literary analysis. But the essence of chokhmah is phenomenological analysis. It's the analysis of the event, not the analysis of a statement. Very different. And Chazal is saying is when Torah Sheba'al Peh, you see, was taken away from phenomena, we can no longer understand the ruchnistic world. We can barely understand what somebody's talking about. And that's what we devote all our time. Most of the time is spent to figure out what is the guy saying, and why is he saying this, and he's saying that. But it's not to understand what is being said. Is it true or not? What does this tell me about the ruch? What does this tell me about Tumah V'Tara? For example, a mace. A mace is an Aviyah V'Osa Tumah. Okay? Very high level Tumah. It's also a Tumah B'Oil. Right? In other words, you can contract the Tumah of a mace, okay, if you're in the same building, let's say. Good. A nevela is what? Is an Ova Tumah. It's a certain category, the beef Tumah called an Ov, okay? And it's a Batama only if you touch it or carry it. So the question is, that's it. Why? Why? Why does a nevela only have masa and maga, and a mace has what do you call oher? Is it because a mace is aviyah vos? You know, that question is not even asked. You won't even ask that question. You see, because you have no way to answer that. You have no way to answer the tumah, the nature of tumah in a mace, in a dead person, and the nature of tumah in a dead animal. You have no way to ask it. You have no way to ask it. That's not your concern. What your concern is what? When the Gemara talks about tumas avir or tumas oil, you understand, what is he saying? But there's never an examination of what's going on over here. What is the thing? It's only, what did he say? What did he mean? Why is he saying this and somebody saying that? That's not chokhmah. That's what Chazal mean. What Chazal mean is this, is that fundamentally Torah, because of what? Because of some kind of problem, and I'll get to the second, we have lost the application of chokhmah to the events of Ruchnius, Maisa Breishis, Maisa Makova, and so on and so forth. And that's why we're like people sitting in a cemetery talking about the guy who just died, or something like that. That's terrible. It's terrible. And the Chazal themselves are witness to this. These are not my statements. These are the statements of Chazal. And if you understand anything about the thinking process, you will understand that the thinking that goes involved to what someone is saying, as opposed to thinking that's involved in terms of why does this happen, are two different types of thinking.
Chazal didn't have the Chachma? The Ramchal didn't have the Chachma?
We'll get to that. We'll get to that in a second. Look. That's the nun. The nun sharei bina is when Torah is in the form of Chachma. When Torah is in the form of Chachma, so that there's analysis of the events themselves, and you have a deeper and deeper understanding of all these ruchnistic events and why they are occurring. That's the nun. Also, you ever look at a Gemara? There's no Seder to a Gemara. You look at a Mishnah. There's no Seder. It's like ein mugdem mucha b'mishnayis, ein mugdem mucha in Shas. It's not. You look at a Gemara throws around kola to kula, but there is no actual sequence. There's no organization in Gemara that we can discern. You see it. Totally. There's no structure. We don't see it. So just like the Torah itself, in a certain sense, is Ein Mukdemucha Torah, Ein Mukdemucha. One Gemara, one Sugi could be talking about Tumah V'Tara, it can be talking about Kachim, Zoyim, everything. It just goes all over like a cholent. But you never grasp, for example, in Shabbos. The Ik of Shabbos is the Lamites Malachas. The 39, right? The 39 categories of Malacha. Yet, the statement of what those Malachas are doesn't appear to Klal Gadol. The first one is about Yitzhak Shabbos. Some detail in Yitzhak, in the Malacha Vaitzah. That's even before you even know what Shabbos is about. That's before you know that Shabbos is 39 Malachas. This is not the way this is not education. This is not the way something is supposed to be thought of. So that's what Chazal are referring to. Now there is some kind of a Seder. When Rebbe wrote the Mishnah, there is a mysterious Seder, but it's not the Seder which we would normally do to understand what's going on. There's something else going on over here. So when you look at the whole thing, something is missing. Something is missing. That's why we have so many Sforim. Most of the Sforim in Torah are what? Are analysis of what somebody's saying. So, what do you have? You have the Gemara, the Amorim on top of the Tanoim. What are they saying? And then, when we don't understand them, then you have the Rishonim that explain the Amorim, Mazel Tov. And they have the Achronim that explain the Rishonim. But everyone is explaining someone else. Somehow what's missing is the understanding of what they're all talking about, which is the fundamental events of the entire world, the entire Bria. Why? Why did Torah come into this? So I'm going to tell you what I believe it is. It's your fault. You know why? Because it's something called a kitrug. A kitrug is an accusation. What accusation? What is the ik accusation? The Gemara came around 2,000 years ago. What was the ik accusation of what on Klal Yisrael at that time? What was most disturbing to the Rebbeinu Shalom about the Jewish people 2,000 years ago? That he destroyed the second Beis HaMikdash. Sinas Chinam. Sinas Chinam. Now, why is that so powerful? You know what the problem is? It says in the Torah, it says, Kol Yisrael Orev Zelazeh. Every Jew is connected to every other Jew. That's what it says. Okay, why? Why am I connected? I don't even know the guy. This guy's a stranger. He's a stranger. Because the Rebbeinu Shalom says, you don't understand that because all of you come from one neshama, all of you are really connected like an organism. You know what an organism is? Like the body. The body is called an organism. Even though it's composed of many different parts, a brain, a liver, a pancreas. The bottom line is they all work together to keep the person alive. Now, I don't know if you know it or not. The cells in your brain know the cells in your liver. Not that they ever met the cells in your liver, they're in different parts of the body. But your brain cells recognize your liver cells. They do. How do I know this? How do I know that if there's no such thing as a stranger cell in your body? Every cell knows every other one, even though they never met. How do I know that? Because it's very simple. If you need a transplant, if you need a liver transplant, and I want to give you the liver from someone else, your body rejects it. So we see that your body knows what doesn't belong to it. If it knows what doesn't belong to it, it knows what does belong to it. So we see that the body is not such a combination of a trillion cells, but we have an achdus. That's what's called an aguda achas. The body itself is an aguda achas. That's called an organism. Klal Yisrael is an organism. That's why the Rebbeinu Shalom said every Jew is responsible for every other Jew. That's why. Because we are an organism. Now, here's the thing. Sinas Chinim destroys the organism of Klal Yisrael. It destroys the aguda achas of Klal Yisrael. So what's the oynish? The oynish is this. When I apply chokhmah and I analyze something, remember, if I take jigsaw puzzle pieces and I put it into one jigsaw puzzle, I see the whole picture. You see it? I see it. Chokhmah is like an organism. All the ideas, for example, if you look at the Mishnah Torah, for example, on Hilchos Kabbalas, if you take all those different ideas, you could put together to form a binyan. They all come together. None of you know how to do that really well, but it's very possible. There's a certain method that allows that. You can take every halach in the Mishnah Torah and put it together so it looks like a building. It's like the blueprint in a building, you see. Which means that knowledge or chokhmah is an organism where every fact belongs with every other fact in its own place. That's what the structure is and so on. So the Rebbeinu Shalom said the following. You know what your oynish is? If you have sinas chinim and you destroy the organism of Klal Yisrael, I will destroy the organism of Torah. You will no longer see the whole thing in its unity. You will see it in pieces. That's the inyan of Shechina in Golus. Shchina in Golus means that it suffers from your ched. If we broke the achdus of Klal Yisrael through Sinas Chinam, then the Rebbeinu Shem says, I will break the achdus of the das and Torah, which is the nun, I will break it. So you never again will understand. You will be busy all day long for the next 2,000 years. The Shas, Gemara was written, and the Churban Ba'Sheni, when what? When Sinas Chinam was the main sin. So the Rebbeinu Shem says, I'm going to change your Torah. Your Torah will not be a Torah that examines the phenomenal events themselves to understand the deepest concepts in Torah. Rather, it's going to be in such a thing that it's all in a machloikis, it's all over the place, and your time will be spent figuring out what somebody said. No longer whether something, its nature and its truth and its reality and what it is. In other words, just like we broke the organism of Klal Yisrael, the Rebbeinu Shem broke the organism what? Of Torah. And when Torah is in its organismic state, when Torah is in the state of an achdus, that's the nun sharei bina. That's the 50th gate. So we understand why we have lost it. And it's something, it's an avelis. It's an avelis. Look, you people are not capable of that avelis because you barely understand what's going on over here. The fact that we have the greatest body of knowledge ever given to the mind of man, which is the Torah, which cover all facts in the entire world, the spiritual world, the Olam HaRuchni and Kasbi, and we can't piece it together anymore. All we can do is spend the next 2,000 years figuring out what some guy said, or why these two guys are arguing, as opposed to working on the events and facts themselves. That's a tremendous churban that we don't even begin to appreciate. And it's connected to Sinas Chinam and Lashon Hara. I am very sorry to have to say this, because I'm also Ben Torah. Except that I realized what's missing for a long time, and it's tremendous avelis. If you understand what Chochmah is, real Chochmah, okay? If you understand the knowledge and information that goes into this to make something like this work, you will understand what Chochmah is. And then you will be an over when you look in the Torah and realize that you have no access to that information when it comes to the Tayyag mitzvahs. Now, let's look at history. We finished the fundamental concepts. I want to begin to show you the history of this in different events. And what you're going to see is in the last 3,000 years, you're going to see a tremendous connection between everything I'm saying. Okay? So, let's do this. How we doing? Tired? Hot? What? Yeah, I'll take it too. What does it look like when it's in Golos? It's not in Golos. I can understand. It's a fact. The way we learn Torah is such that this until we have, because the first and the Shia is in Golos. And we put it there because it's
But it's still unbelievable.
Yes.
Why? What?
Yes, but it's nothing near. Right. It's like building, it's like if I went to 3-bedroom apartment as opposed to 4-bedroom. Yeah, 3-bed is nice.
Doesn't Chochmah, what he said is meaningless. The entire what he said is everything.
But what he's saying is going to answer someone else. And that's only if you know what he said. That's not, we don't even know what he said.
So it's still there.
As long as you talk about the facts of it, it's important. But how well you can understand it. We're talking about the Mashiach. Now you begin to understand what he's going to do. That's why it's all Kaddish. You get on the grass. I want you to understand what's coming up ahead. And that's why when he shows up, every yeshiva goes to fall to the ground. You know, because his understanding of this is so vastly superior. It's like a different Torah. It's all Chodesh. Kim Yitzhak takes a Torah. It's an all Chodesh. All Chodesh. I want to talk about it in a second.
Try to put it on mute.
Let me kind of get back here. Please, let's do this. Hold on. I'm going to answer this now.
Okay, good.
Yeah, the Ramchal didn't have the Chochmah.
I'm gonna get back into this. I promise you. I'm not gonna let you guys hang.
already throwing out.
But this must be shocking to most of you. Now, is that on now, Eliezer? Yeah. Okay, let's now talk, okay, fundamentally, let's talk, okay, let's talk now historically. You know, what did Moshe Rabbeinu know? And let's go over some of the stuff and so on. And we're going to begin to understand many chazals, which fundamentally are very difficult to understand, okay? Because we're going to now go over the whole Torah, the Nun Shai Rabbeinu, historically, to see what is going on over here. First, on Shavuos, which is next week, what happened? Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Har Sinai, okay, to makabel the Torah, which appears in what's called the Luchas. Now, a lot of people don't know this. The Luchas that he wanted to bring down is the Or of Mashiach. It's the 50th gate. In other words, that's a Torah which has none of these problems. That's a Torah which applies the analytical concepts, okay, to the ultimate facts of the world. Okay, Ruchnis, Maisim, Makov, all the facts of the world. And the knowledge that we would gain by that kindness when Torah and Chochmah are together is incredible. And that's the Luchas Rishonos. That's the first thing. What happened? Chet of the Egel, right? What happened? So Moshe Rabbeinu comes and so on, and what he does. Now, you have to understand something important. In order to get that kind of information called the Luchas Rishonos, or the first tablets, Moshe Rabbeinu had something called Aspak Lari HaMe'ila. The Nevuah of Moshe was completely different than the Nevuah of anyone else. Why? Because it required that level of Nevuah to bring down that kind of information in the words of the Torah. No other Navi could touch that. No other Navi could touch the Nun, the 50th gate of Torah, when it's merged or connected to Chokhmah, except if you have the Nevuah, where you can speak to the Bnei Shalom per while you're awake, and actively and proactively. You can actually have a conversation with God. You see, so he needed that kind of Nevuah to connect to the shirish, or to the root of Torah at that level. What happened? Klal Yisrael worshipped the golden calf. So what happened? He took the luchas and he broke them and he put them down. Why did he break them? Why? Because he knew that if he gives those luchas back, he knew you have to go get them back from the Shemayim. Whereas if you broke them, all you have to do is glue them together. It's easy to glue broken furniture than to go to a store and buy new furniture. All over again. So when he broke the luchas, okay, and this is very subtle, when he broke the luchas, what he did was, he kept the 50th gate of Chochmah here. He didn't give it back. Where did he put it? Where did he put this level of knowledge? Okay? On Yom Kippur we know he came up and he came down with the second tablets, Luchas Shnias. What's in the Luchas Shnias? That is no longer the 50th gate. When you look at the Luchas Shnias and you look at it, right? Chazal say, Ein Mutu Muchu B'Torah. There's no organization anymore. When you look at the Torah that we have and you look at it, you really can't see that this is something written by God. It doesn't have order, it doesn't have sequence. You don't see in this a book that's written by the Bnei Shalom himself. Even though the Bnei Shalom says this is my greatest work, which is called the Torah, we don't see it. You see it. So obviously the second luchas do not have the clarity and the precision of the first. So we are the first, and this is something. The chiddush is that the first luchas are in the second. In other words, the second luchas are not simply what? A new Torah. It's the Torah of the 50th gate in enclosed, concealed form. In other words, if you want to know what that 50th gate, if you want to know what the Or of Mashiach was, which Moshe Rabbeinu was supposed to get, you can get it by looking into the Torah itself. Shocking. Before that, okay, that Nun Shai Rabbeinu, the 50th gate, was not in the Torah. It was purely in the Torah of the first of the 50. That was the Or of Mashiach. Moshe Rabbeinu was a Mashiach ben Yosef, to bring down this Torah. when the Jews, when Klal Yisrael worshipped the golden calf, okay, he broke them. But in breaking them, it doesn't mean that he simply kept them away. It means that the shefa, the or, the light of the first Sifrei Luchos went into the second, but it went into it in its foundation. It's underneath. So the Torah that we have actually contains the Or Mashiach. It does. It contains the light of the first gate, but we can't see it. That's why it says Ein Mukdim Torah. It means it's all confusing. It's all what? There's no foreground, background, first. It doesn't exist. It's all but it hides. So the Torah that we have is not Stamach Torah. The Torah that we have has two levels. There's the inner level, the Pnimius, which is the 50th gate. It's the Or Mashiach that has the ability to understand everything, but it's covered over with a veneer, like oak veneer. You see it. It covers over that. So when we look at the surface, we don't see that anymore. Because of that, something amazing happened. And you have to understand something. In order to bring down the Luchas Rishon, in order to bring down this Or Mashiach, okay, you need an aspect Rayamira. You need the highest level of Nevuah. But once, I'm going to tell you, it's a very big Chiddush, a very powerful Chiddush. I'm always touching it. Okay, verse 5. Here's a tremendous Chiddush, which is very unusual. You know the Nevi'im, Yirmiyah, Yechezkel, Yeshaya. What shaykhs do they have Torah? Their Nevuah is Aspakar She'enamira. They want a much lower level of Nevuah. That Nevuah, that, you understand something? I'm talking about Shmuel HaNavi, these incredible people. Yechezkel, Yirmiyah, Yeshaya. Their Nevuah has no shaykhs to Torah in its true form. Because in its true form, only the highest Nevuah of Aspakar Amira, clear Nevuah, can bring it down. But once Moshe Rabbeinu put the Luchas Rishonis, this Nun, into the Torah that we have, now any Navi could be Mechadish Torah. So what came on suddenly is because of the second Luchas that Moshe Rabbeinu brought down on what do you call it, on Yom Kippur, that we have the whole concept of the Nevi'im. Otherwise, we're not Goyos the Nevi'im. The Nevi'im that we have Torah, Nevi'im, Ksuvim. Nevi'im and Ksubim only exist. It only exists as part of the Torah, which is called Divrei Kabbalah, is only because Moshe Rabbeinu put the old Torah that required his type of Nevuah into a kisor, into a concealment that now is available to a regular Navi. That's why Yeshaya can mama say Torah. That's why the Nevi'im after him can mama say things which are Torah. Only because of the Shivra Luchas. Otherwise they would have no Rishus. Because you have to understand, the true only form of Torah that's possible is the Nun. The only form that Torah can be in is in the 50th gate, where it's a complete, where Chochmah and Torah are united. Torah cannot exist in another form. That's a tremendous diminishment. The only reason why it was able, because Moshe Rabbeinu prayed to the Bnei Shem and he said, save Klal Yisrael. And he realized that the only way to save Klal Yisrael because of the sin of the Chet of the Egel is because Klal Yisrael sinned and the 50th gate is up here and Klal Yisrael was down here. He realized that Klal Yisrael, because of the sin of the Egel, could not go up to receive the Torah in Nun. But Moshe Rabbeinu realized, I can still save them if I bring the Nun down. That's a tremendous chiddush. So when Moshe Rabbeinu took the Nun, the highest form of Torah, okay, and what he did, and he took that and he davened the Bnei says, you can do it, don't worry. The Or Mashiach is possible suddenly to be encased in a tomb. I will let that happen. Hanicheni, you know, solachti kidvaracha. It's a very important thing. Kidvaracha means he said to Moshe, I'm going to be makabel. I will let the Torah of the highest level go into a gullus, go into a tomb of darkness. And it would then be on the same level of the Jews, so I don't have to destroy the Jews. You see what the story is? So that's why suddenly every Navi has shaykhs now to Torah. Otherwise there would be no Nevi'im at all. You see, this is number one. This is Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, let's go to the second person in Jewish history who had acted. But Moshe never got the 50th gate. He never. When the Bnei Shem said, Lakewood, go down because of the Chet of the Egel, he stayed at the 49th level. Even though he broke the Luchas, he was never able to really absorb and use the 50th gate. He didn't get it. Yeah, but that's having it is one thing, knowing it is another. He was never zoicha. He was never zoicha to it. But there was somebody who was zoicha, Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef. The only other person who had shaykhs to that level of Torah, where there's a tremendous connection between Torah and Chokhmah, was Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef. You see it. How do we know? Because we see in the Medrash that Moshe Rabbeinu was jealous of Rabbi Akiva. He was jealous. Now, you know something? Moshe Rabbeinu was not jealous of anyone. Okay, we don't come over here to Israel. There's never been a Navi like Moshe. So how could it be? Because when he looked at Rabbi Akiva, he saw that he had the 50th gate. How? Because he saw something astonishing. He saw that Rabbi Akiva was able to douchen the tagin, the little crowns on the letters. And he knew the only way you can douchen Torah on the 50th level on a tagin is you have the ability to understand the 50th gate. And he knew he didn't have that. You see, you think he was jealous of Rabbi Akiva because Rabbi Akiva was able to darshan, was able to understand the crowns on the letters. So he figured, okay, that's not true. You don't understand what he was jealous about. He saw that Rabbi Akiva had the 50th gate, the perfect Torah, what's called Torah Shlema, because of his ability to darshan the tagin. And he was jealous. So the Banishim says, don't worry. Even with the ability to darshan the tagin in the 50th gate, we still have to come to Aspak Lari HaMe'ira to learn what's called Halacha L'Moshe Sinai. There are certain halachas in the Torah that even the Mashiach can't figure out with Haskalah. But for that, you need Aspak Lari HaMe'ira. That's why he said, and it says, and Moshe was satisfied. In other words, that his Aspak Lari HaMe'ira still had a te'elis, it still had a purpose. You see it. And this was the fundamentally what was going on between the two. Now, when we look at the Ma'aseh of Rabbi Akiva, let's now look at Rabbi Akiva, and we're going to begin to understand some really unusual things. We all know that Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef was a Mashiach in his time, and we all know the Chazal, and I'm not going to go into it, I've done that in other shiurim, that in the year 4000 of Brias Olam, it says it's Yemais Mashiach. The first 2,000 years is Tohu, the second 2,000 years is Torah, the last 2,000 years, which is the 4,000 years, is what he calls Yemais Mashiach. What does that mean? It means the following. It means that the Banishim said, I'm bringing down the Nun Sharebina whether Klal Yisrael deserves it or not. We are starting Yemais Mashiach. The avoided to bring the Tikkun of the Bria was only the first 4,000 years. The last 2,000 is for the continuity. So the Yemais Mashiach started 2,000 years ago. Nobody knows it. But it went into what's called the negative phase. But the old Mashiach came down. That's why the 4 Tanoim went into Pardes. Remember it says, Dalet Nichtel Pardes. 4 Tanoim went into Pardes. And only one came out, which is Rabbi Akiva. What were they after? They were after the old Mashiach. How did they know they can get it? Because they knew the Banishim said it's coming down. In the year 4000, it's coming down side by side, either way. And so on. So how did Rabbi Akiva get it? It says Pardes. What Pardes? Pardes is Pshat Remes to Asoyim. It means Rabbi Akiva, through his Seichel, through his Haskalah, was able to look into the Torah that we have and withdraw the 50th gate of Mashiach, which shows you that the old Mashiach is with us, except it's concealed in the tomb of what we have today called Torah. But he knew how to draw it out. He knew how to take it out. See, through what's called on. He has Haskalah. Now let's say something Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva had a different kind of Bechina. Moshe Rabbeinu had what's called Aspak Lari HaMe'ira. He had a nevuah which was clear. How did Rabbi Akiva take out the 50th gate from the Torah we have? Because Rabbi Akiva had, and I'm creating this term, Haskalah HaMe'ira. There's only one man, only a Mashiach has a type of intellect or logical understanding, okay, that can bring out the deepest parts. It's like the highest form of intellect because it's Me'ira. He sees clearly. So Rabbi Akiva's Mashiach had not Aspaklai or Nevuah, which is what? Clear. He had incredible intellectual abilities that was clear. But only a Mashiach has that. With that kind of a weapon, he can pull out the 50th gate from what's called Haskalah HaMe'ira. Now, there's a very strange story. What happened? What happened to the power days that Rabbi Akiva figured out? And the answer is, it was lost. It was lost. Why? Because Rabbi Akiva failed. He failed. He himself passed, but Klal Yisrael failed because of Sinas Chinam. There's a very interesting Gemara, which is really bizarre, and I just want to say it because it's such a strange Gemara. It makes, and so on. And I believe I figured out a pshat with that when it's on top of. I don't know if most of you know it. Rabbi Akiva was married to a woman, her name was Rachel. And she let him learn for 24 years, right? Well, after that, he became a tremendous talent song. I believe, I'm not sure, but I think she passed away. Anyway, what happened was he had a certain Misa story with a woman named Tina Rafina. The Roman governor was named, the Roman governor, the governor of Judea, the Roman governor of Judea, his name was Turnus Rufus. He was the governor of Judea and so on. He had a wife, her name was Tina Rafina. She was supposed to be one of the most beautiful women alive. Okay. Turnus Rufus told his wife to go and seduce Rabbi Akiva. That's what he said. So that he would do a chet and he would lose whatever koyach he had. Obviously, the Roman government knows it's like Yosef and Bas and what do you call the wife Potiphar. Okay, so he said, you know something? You are one of the most beautiful women on earth. I want you to go and be mafata, seduce Rabbi Akiva and make a chet. So what happened? So come on. So she came over. She came over to Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef and she stood in front of him. And I don't know what this meant on. So the Gemara says, at first he looked at her and he spit on the ground. And then suddenly after that, he started laughing. And then after that, he started crying. Strange Gemara. So some people give pshat on that. They say, what happened? That Rabbi Akiva took one look at her and he realized what she was trying to do. And he said, Fui, fair, you're trying to seduce me? This is disgusting. So he spit on the ground. And then the Gemara says that he laughed because he saw that she's going to marry him. He saw Baruch HaKodesh that she was destined to be his wife. Check this out. And then finally he started to cry because he saw that she will die. And it's an incredible thing for a woman of such beauty to be in the Kevin, the grave, Rima V'Tolea. That's what it says. Now, that's a very strange story, and so on. But I want to give this story a pshat that connects to the whole thing and so on, a different way. It's much deeper than meets the eye. When Tina Rafina came to Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef to attempt to, as an Assyrian, to seduce him or whatever the story is, he spit. But he didn't spit because of what she was trying to do to him. That wasn't his problem. He spit in the ground, I believe, because he said, I don't understand. You're an Ashes Ish, he said. No matter what the story, how can you do this to yourself? Are you crazy? You're an Ashes Ish, you're still chayav mitzvah ben noyach. And what do you want to do? You want to what? Seduce me and what? And be over transgress adultery? He spit because he's saying, fui, to what you're doing. That's number one. The second thing is he started to laugh because he saw she would marry him. Why was he laughing? And this is very interesting. Because he realized something absolutely shocking. What he realized is, wait a minute, this is the wife of Turnus Rufus. Turnus Rufus was like the Caesar of Judaism. Well, Turnus Rufus as Rome is like Esau. And he realized, wait a minute, if I'm destined to marry this woman, and then when she's coming to seduce me, this is an Assyrian. But the real goal in the end is what? Is that if I'm going to marry this woman in the end, she's going to be Megaya. He realized, wait a minute, if I'm going to take the wife of the Roman consul, it means the Indian of Yosef, Sidna Shalesef, it means that I've reached the Madrega where I am Sholet. I now have domination over Esau. Because you have to understand, the wife of a man is so like the Shechina, Nukva. The ability of a person suddenly to take the wife of one of the greatest leaders in Esau means that suddenly he has control of the Shechina. It means that the Shechina itself is coming out of the Golos of Edom. So he saw that his ability to marry her was symbolic of the Geula itself. So he was laughing. He says, that's what this is about. There's an Assyrian over here for me. But the goal is to bring the Geula. Because if I marry her, I am sholet on what? On the Shechina, which is now invested in Esau. You understand what I'm saying? And then finally, he started to cry because he saw in the end, she would die and he would die. And he said, that means that even though I am sholet on Esau, what's called Esau, Yosef's the Sidna Shel Esau, he has the koyach to destroy Esau, it doesn't make a difference. It will be only temporary. Because we're both going to die. And he realized that the Nun Sharei Bina has nowhere to go. Nowhere to go. So this little story here, which is a very strange story, corroborates this in a very incredible type of thing. And he realized, shockingly, that the 50th gate, which was Zoicha to, is not going anywhere. You see it. Even though he's taking the Shechina back from Esau on a certain level. Now, let's go on. So what happened to the Torah? What happened to the Torah? So Rabbi Akiva failed to bring the Geula. So what happened to the 50th gate? What happened to the Torah that was Shalem with Chochmah and Torah together? What happened? So let's look. First of all, let's look and see. Rabbi Shimon, why do we celebrate Lag BaOmer? Why? Well, why? Because Rabbi Shimon wrote the Zohar. Mazel Tov, he wrote the Zohar. So he gave us the Kabbalah. Is that why we do it? Absolutely not. It's not true. In fact, if Rabbi Shimon did was do us a disservice. Anything, what was the disservice? It's fun like this. When Rabbi Akiva brought down the Kabbalah, okay, and the ultimate understanding of the Bria, okay, he brought it down as a nimshal. He understood the meaning of the whole thing. You see it. When we look at the Zohar is in the form of a mashal. It's incomprehensible. It's all metaphors and symbols. So all Rabbi Shimon did was to take the nimshal, what Rabbi Akiva had, and put it in the form of a mashal. Rabbi Shimon was machasak. He concealed the light. So why are we thanking Rabbi Shimon? Interesting question. And the answer is because what he took from Rabbi Akiva was the nun. Rabbi Shimon went into the cave, okay, and what he did was he expanded the nun. And obviously he understood the nimshal. I don't know, he didn't understand as great as Rabbi Akiva, although Rabbi Shimon was a Mashiach ben Yosef. He had the neshama of Moshe Ben, it was a Gilgal of Moshe, and the Nitzah to Moshe Ben. And in that cave, he worked out the whole nimshal of Rabbi Akiva with the Eleanor, the so on and so forth. He worked that out, you see it. And then what happened? He left the cave. Do you remember what happened after he left the cave? He was moedik mesameach, because he said, okay, Rabbi Akiva didn't make it, I'll make it. So mesameach. Suddenly he comes along to see the Jew, and he says, what? He said to him, what, you're working? You know, the whole story is, he saw someone, and he saw a Jew was working on a farm, and he said, what's going on over here? How could you leave Torah and this and that and so on? And he looked at him, and he became a galchel at Somas. He killed him, and he became a heap of bones. You see it. So that the Banachim said, what do you want to do? Do you want to destroy my world? Get back into the cave. So he went back to the cave for another year. But the truth is, what really happened? What I believe happened is very simply this. Rabbi Shimon, having worked out fundamentally the Torah of Rabbi Akiva, was Mesameach. When he left the cave, he thought that this is the Gula. So Rabbi Akiva didn't make it, I'll make it. And I'll bring it to the world, okay? What happened? The guy that he saw, I think there was a medrash that said, that guy he saw was the guy who spoke to the Romans, that he said, I think Shimon ben Gera, who spoke to the Romans and told the Romans that he said that the Romans are Rishoyim. That was the guy who was roichel on him. And he looked at him and said, what? You're still alive? What was the problem? And he killed him. What? Because it means, wait a minute, if you're the one who put me in the cave, and you're still alive, that means there's still mechilas and sinas chinim amongst Klal Yisrael. It means my whole work for 13 years is not going to make it. So when the guy died, that's what so the Banachim said, it's not for you to determine when the Gula will be. You see, go back to your cave. It's like a truth. You see, and the Banachim said to Rabbi Shimon, you don't understand, you went into that cave, not to what, to bring the Gula where Rabbi Akiva failed, because Klal Yisrael still is filled with sinas chinam and so on. You did this to bring out what I called the nun of Rabbi Akiva to whatever extent you did. Now you're going to have to take that and put it into a book so that it's available for the masses, but in the form of a mashal, so nobody understands it. So when you look at the Zohar, what are you looking at? You're looking at Simpson. You're looking at what? You're looking at the acha, or the oizen, choit and pet, the eye, the lights coming from the eyes, the nose, the ears, whatever the stories. You're looking at the concept of spheres and partsupim. Look at the abiyah olamas. Nobody knows what these things really are. Very few people understand the nimshal, or the meaning of these symbols. So Rabbi Shimon realized that his tachlis was not to replace Rabbi Akiva. His tachlis was to be machaser, to hide the Or Mashiach, the Nun Shai Rabbeinu. That's what he realized when he killed that guy. Instant shot. It's a whole different concept. So that's what happened. So Rabbi Shimon therefore put the Torah, the Nun, into the tomb. Whereas Moshe Rabbeinu entombed the Nun in the Torah that we have, in the Shiva Luchas. Rabbi Akiva entombed the Nun in Rabbi Shimon, and he put it into what? Into Mishalom. That was the end of the Nun being access. That's what's going on. So the Nun of the Or Mashiach went into the tomb twice because of the sinas chinam of Klal Yisrael.
Why is it a yontif?
Because he saved the Nun. Because that the Kittuk of sinas chinam should completely eradicate the Nun. It should go back up. It's a yontif because Rav Shimon was still zoichet to hold the Nun, like the Shiva Luchas. Moshe kept the Shiva Luchas, even though he concealed it. Rabbi Shimon kept the Kabbalah. He kept the Hashkofa of Klal Yisrael on its deepest level, okay? But he can only put into Mashal. But because he was allowed to keep it, because we didn't lose it, we did not lose the nun. You see, that's why we're Meshabech. That's why we have Lag BaOmer. Because he saved what Rabbi Akiva wasn't able to do. He saved it. So at least L'Doros we have that. But not for long. Not for long, and so on. Because what happened to the Zoy after that? So he told Rabbi Abba, one of his Talmidim, I want you because you're good and right in Mishalom. He knew that the only way to save Rabbi Akiva's nun is to put it into Mishalom. But what happened? It was lost for 1,000 years. It was buried. And Rabbi Shimon knew it would be buried. When he saw that guy was roichel on him, he realized there is no gula. It means that he has the ability to save it, to put it into a mashal, a metaphor, symbolic form, but in the end it will be lost. And so on. It was lost for 1,000 years, and we discovered, 1,000 years later, and we're going to talk about that in a second, why it was lost. Let's look at the halacha. What about the halacha of Torah? What happened to the halacha of Torah? Okay? What happened? Well, guess what? Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Akiva, his Talmud was Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, and so on. And their Talmidim was Rabbi Yehuda Anasi. The Mishnah. Look at the Mishnah. The Mishnah is the beginning of Kimei Sei Oilam. Just like Rabbi Akiva had the Nun Sharabina in Hashkafa entombed, he had the halacha, the ability to look at the phenomena of the Torah itself with unbelievable chokhmah, entombed. So that the Torah Shebe'al Peh now took the tzura of Mishnah, Machlokas and Gemara. Machlokas, here left and right, literary analysis. Which means that from Rabbi Akiva, who failed to be, to enshrine into Makayim, the 50th gate with Mashiach, his two Talmidim, fundamentally from them came the choshech, or the concealment of halacha, and the choshech in concealment of hashkafa. From that. And for the next, and for the next 2,000, that's what we have. We no longer have the Torah Rabbi Akiva of the we have what we have. And like someone asked me, that's choshev. Let me explain to you something. You have to understand. It's true. Relatively speaking, this is our Torah. I want to be very clear about this. Relatively speaking, this is our Torah. And the Baruch Hashem is mesameach with the Torah that we have. He is. Absolutely. Don't think for 1 second that I'm telling you you're wasting your time. Chas v'shalom. Because your neshamas are on a much smaller level, this is the Torah that you need to be machaya you, to make into something. Yeah, but absolutely speaking, it's a sad case. When you compare what we could have had, the Nun, Chochmah and Torah, unbelievable understanding, we lost that. So from an absolute sense, we're aniyim. We're aniyim. But you know something? It's better to be an ani than to be dead. That's the bottom line. So, you want to measure if you're better off or not? Well, it depends. An ani is much better off than a dead person. But you can't compare an ani to a wealthy person. That's where we're sitting.
So what's the good news?
There's good news. Get to it. How are we doing? Probably knocked me off another half hour. Is that all right? Okay? Sorry. I want to give you a full picture. Because you're not going to hear this again. I don't think so. I don't. There was something else that was missing that the Baruch Hashem did. You ever look at a Gemara and so on, and I'm just going to say this very quickly. You ever look at a Gemara, you say to yourself, who's this written for? In order to understand Gemara, you have to be a Baki in all the Mishnah. You got to be a Baki in Tanakh. You have to be a complete Talmid Chacham just to be able to learn Gemara. And that's the truth. So therefore, who is the Gemara written for? The Gemara is not an educational textbook. It's not a textbook to teach you anything. So who did Chazal write the Gemara for? And the answer is, the Gemara was written for Poskim. It was written by Chazal for Poskim to teach a Posik how to paskin, how to think in halacha. But it was not written for a school. It was not written as an educational textbook, which is written in beginners, intermediate, and advanced levels, and so on. Why? Why did Chazal write the Torah in the form of Gemara, which is only shaykh to someone who's already a Talmid Chacham? And the answer is, and it's a very simple answer, they didn't have a printing press. Do you know what a printing press is? You have no idea. A printing press takes one book and publishes 1 million copies. That means everyone has it. When you've got a printing press, okay, you can distribute the copies. If you don't have a printing press, how do you write a Torah? You have to write it by hand. You know what it costs to hire a sofer for 1 year to write Shas? Thousands and thousands and thousands. Who's got that kind of money? So Chazal realized that they don't have the ability, to write the Torah down and publish it and give it to people. So they said we have to publish only the book which is most important. And they said the most important person in Klal Yisrael is not the Rosh Yeshiva, it is not the Rav, it's the Posek. That's the most important one because he has the Paskin Chalis from Gemara as it applies to life. So they wrote the one sefer called Shas to make someone into a Posek. But it had nothing to do with education. You see it. Therefore, they were forced to use Gemara as a fundamental textbook in schools. But that's not good until the printing press was invented. Then you can rearrange the halachas in very organized form and teach it to everyone. But Chazal realized, and that's part of the Choshech Torah, that the Rabbi Shimon did not want the Torah to go out to all of Klal Yisrael in a simple form so that it would be through a text or any kind like that. Why? Because we want Zoicha. So when you look at the entire situation, the Rabbi Shimon denied Chazal. They denied us the ability to raise Torah to the level of incredible Chachma and Torah in that sense. Now, there's one more thing you have to realize, which I have to say and so on, which is very strange. This is going to be the toughest part to handle. There's something else that happened at the same time. You remember the story of Shimon HaTzadik? Shimon HaTzadik, when Alexander the Great came to Yerushalayim, to conquer Yerushalayim, he came there to conquer Yerushalayim. And all the Jews were afraid until he came there and he saw Shimon HaTzadik. And when he came to Shimon HaTzadik, he bowed down to Shimon HaTzadik. This is Alexander the Great, the conqueror of the world. And his general said, why do you bow down? He said, because I saw in my dream, this man came to me in my dream before every battle to tell me if I will be successful or not and to show me exactly what to think. He said Shimon HaTzadik came to him in his dreams, okay, to teach him how to win wars and what to do. This is a bizarre thing. Shimon HaTzadik, okay, goes to Alexander the Great to teach him, and as a reward, the Jews named all their male people of the Shalom that year Alexander. That's where the name Alexander comes into the Jewish people. How do you understand this? How do you understand this? And the answer, this is a tremendous concept, because what it is, it means this. Shimon HaTzadik realized at his time already that Torah and Chochmah are going to be separated. Where is Chochmah going to go? He realized it's going to go to the Yavon, Greece. Chochmah is shaykh to Greece. Why? Because Greece produced two of the greatest minds among the greatest minds in human history. It produced a man called Aristotle, okay? And Aristotle was mechadish something that no one ever wrote about. What Aristotle did was he examined the nature of existence itself and wrote a book on the nature of existence. He actually wrote a book examining, okay, logically, what is existence? What are its different forms and so on and so forth. The book he wrote, which is called The Metaphysics, is so powerful that it's the book that the Rambam used and the Ramchal. They all draw from that, okay? It is the greatest book ever written in antiquity. What Aristotle wrote. Because it examines existence itself on its own, regardless of what kind, what type of entity, okay? And he also wrote the book, The Organon, which is on logic. So Aristotle, for the first time, wrote something that no other person ever wrote. It is the ultimate concept of Chochmah, because the Chochmah that examines existence itself is the highest form. Then there was another man, Archimedes. Archimedes was one of the greatest person in terms of science. Archimedes, 2,000 years ago, already discovered the scientific method and certain mathematics. And so he established the concept of science in certain ways and so on. And so therefore these two men had the greatest chokhmah of the ancient times and so on and so forth. What is that? You may say to yourself, what is that? Why is that? Why did Shimon HaTzadik go? Because Alexander the Great was a Talmud or a student. Alexander was a Talmud of Aristotle. And even though Aristotle came up with what's called Greek wisdom and so on, it was Alexander the Great, his student, that spread it out to the entire world. And Shimon HaTzadik understood that because of the true Geman Klal Yisrael, because of the Sinas Chinam, and because the Shekhinah is going into a Golus after the destruction of the first temple, and the Shekhinah is going into a Golus, and Torah and Chochmah will be separated, where is Chochmah going? To the Greeks. To the Greeks. That's why he encouraged Alexander the Great to win, because he realized that the Chochmah that used to be in Torah now is going to the Yevonim or the Greeks. And of course that's the story later on of Hanukkah and so on. So he actually encouraged and supported Alexander to conquer the world, so that the Chochmah of the Yevonim will be spread out to the entire world. Now you have to understand something else which is interesting. What happened to all these books that Aristotle wrote and all these things and so on to it? Do you know what happened to it? It was lost. The Zohar was buried, the books of Aristotle were buried, and they were lost 1,000 years. Both of these books, the Torah of Rabbi Shimon, okay, was lost, and the Chochmah of Aristotle was lost. Is there some kind of a parallel here? What is this? What is it that Shimon HaTzadik understood, and what Aristotle and so on told, and the parallel that both of these things, Torah and Chochmah, were both concealed for the next 1,000 years? What is that? And what I believe and so on, and explains why the Rambam went after Aristotle, and even Ramchal wrote a book and said, if you're going, what did they see in this man Aristotle? You know what they saw? What they saw is really an incredible thing. When you look at Kabbalah, what is Kabbalah? The key word in Kabbalah is called the Istalshelus. It means how the Rebbeinu Shalom created the world, and so on. What's the problem? The problem is that the Rebbeinu Shalom is Ein Sof. There's no definition, there's no boundary. So the shayla is, how can something which has no boundary and is beyond concept create a world which is in boundary and in concept? How do you go from one to the other? So the entire Kabbalah really is an analysis of existence. How you go from boundless existence, Ein Sof, to Yes Sof. The whole Kabbalah, the Ishtalshelus, is really nothing more than an explanation how the Rebbeinu Shalom creates the world, creates them in Anushi and the Zelosi, how he does it through all the Elamas, so that suddenly you get to someone called us. You see, that's what the Kabbalah is. But the Kabbalah, which fundamentally concerns existence and consciousness, which is the bottom of Kabbalah and existence on, was put in the form of a mashal. If it's in the form of a mashal, how do we open it up? We need a key or a mafteach. Because the Zohar, which is the science of how the existence of God becomes the existence of us, is in the form of a mashal or a metaphor or a symbol. It needs a key to turn it back into the nimshal. What is that key? And the answer, I believe, that key is the Greek metaphysics. Because for the first time in human history, the science of existence appears. So if you take some of the information in that chokhmah, of course you've got to throw away the minas. But if you take some of the key ideas of Aristotle in that chokhmah and you apply it to the Kabbalah, you suddenly begin to open up what's completely concealed. This is what the Rambam tried to do. The Rambam recognized on some level that there's something about the chokhmah of Yavon which has the ability to explain tremendous hashkafa. So that's why he incorporates that in his Monavuchim. The problem with the Rambam is that the Rambam didn't have the facts. He didn't have the Kabbalah. But he understood with the key, he understood that there's something in the Chokhmah of Greece, okay? There's something in that Chokhmah. Something in that Chokhmah which enables us to open up the nature of existence itself. The problem with the Rambam was he didn't have the Kabbalah facts, but he understood the key. And that's why a man as big as the Rambam did that. The Groyos comment on the Rambam, if you would have used this information on the Kabbalah, that would have been a different story. But the Rambam writes, I had no Messiah. I don't have the Messiah, and so on. But we begin to understand why suddenly the Ramchal, we begin to understand why the Ramchal and the Rambam, these two people, suddenly look to the Chokhmah of Yavon. You see, and why Shimon HaTzadik promotes Yavon. This is a very mysterious thing. And what's more amazing is the fact that as the Zohar is concealed, so is Aristotle. Now, once we understand this concept, okay, we now go to the rest of history. And there's the good news. For the next 600 years, historians refer to it from the 4th century till about the 12th, 11th, 12th, 10th, 11th century, which is a period 600 years. Historians call it the Dark Ages. Why did he call it the Dark Ages? Simple. There was no Chokhmah. The whole Greek Chokhmah disappeared. In Judaism, the whole Kabbalah disappeared, except for Yechidim, okay? In terms of this. In terms of Gemara, Gemara was completely unmasuda. They had no Meforshim on Gemara. Gemara was a fundamental text written by hand, that's it. There was no commentaries in Gemara at all, whatsoever. And there was no Seder to Gemara whatsoever. So it was like a tremendous choshech. See, there's only one thing that became very powerful and very famous, and that was Christianity. Christianity rose and grew and became very powerful in those years. Why did Christianity become so powerful? Because since the main sin of the Jewish people is sin chinam, Esav or Edom, who converted himself into Christianity, became tremendous anti-Semites. And the anti-Semites of the Christian is there to punish the Jews for their sin chinam, so that for every time there's sin chinam between one Jew and another, there's sin chinam between a Christian and a Jew. So on a scale of the two are equal. So the purpose of Christianity was to bring a tahara to the Jews from their sin chinam. What reigned supreme in those 700 years was Christianity. That's it. And we understand now why Christianity reigned supreme. Why science of Archimedes and logic, why? Because Christianity, and this is important, Christianity cannot survive when science exists. It's a shtus. When science rules, Christianity dies. When philosophy rules, Christianity dies. Christianity can only grow and do its job, which is the tahara, the purification of Jews through its anti-Semitism, when there is no chokhmah. Because as soon as chokhmah comes out into the world, Christianity looks like a bunch of idiots that they believe that a man is a god. You see it. So the Baruch Shem took away every vestige of chokhmah, every vestige of emes, so that Christianity can survive. Now we finally come to the last period, okay, which is the Erev HaShishi, or the 6,000th year, which is the Erev Shabbos, the beginning of the Gula. And we need to list quickly some of the things that happened, and we're almost done. Okay. And begin to see what we mean by the Gula. Okay. Number one, in 1290, the Zohar is found. They find it. There's a Shailef who wrote it, but then they found, it's finally found by Moshe de Leon, Shem Tov de Leon, its own, and it comes out. So suddenly, the Zohar, which is the Chokhmah of what it... What's that?
Copy the Rabbi wrote, that's what they found?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how they did that. I'm not sure, but they find the Zohar. They also find the Sefer Bahir. The two Sform, the textbooks that are written in Kabbalah, are found in the beginning of what's called the medieval period in the 13th century, 1290. One.
Buried in Israel, they found?
Yeah. Number two, once the Zohar is found, but it's in the form of a mashal. Once the Zohar is found, okay, then comes along Rav Moshe Kodever the Ramak and the Ari, who expand the Zohar. But you have to remember, the Ari has a tremendous chesaron. What? The Akisvi Ari, the Ari who expanded Kabbalah, also wrote in Mishalom. It's the same thing. He had the same problem as Rab Shimon. Both Rab Shimon and the Ari both wrote as a mashal. So even though they are now Megala, the ultimate Nun, the Chokhmah of the Nun Sharabina, which is now coming out in the Kabbalah again, is still concealed in mashal. But at least now it's out and it's expanded. That's number one. Number two, okay, we find the rise of halacha. For the first time, something unbelievable happens in halacha, and very few people understand this. For the first time, since the Tanoim wrote the Mishnah Gemara and the Tzom Tovot, the Gemara is Masuda. It's organized into a system, not based on who said anything, but based on what the halach is in any circumstance. Which book is that? The Mishnah Torah. You have to understand what the Rambam did. You see, we learned the Rambam as a matter of course, but the bottom line is, the Rambam was the first one that restored Tferes to the Torah. He restored on some level the Nun in halacha by systemizing the entire Torah, not based on who said anything. I've seen the godless of the Rambam, because he said, I'm not concerned so much with who said it, I'm concerned with the phenomena. I'm concerned with the halachas as they are arranged unto themselves. Like if you would write a book on physics, where you would start with mechanics and optics and electronics and nuclear. If you would write a book in physics, you would see a Seder. You see, and in that book, they wouldn't be writing who said anything. They wouldn't. They'd be writing the facts, the phenomenon, the events themselves. The Rambam took the entire Shas and converted it to a book that resembles physics. The first one in it, That's the godless of the Rambam. You see, you think the godless of the Rambam is that he wanted a bunch of halachas. No, he was beside of it. He brought for the first time in halacha the concept of yesh mugdum umuch b'Torah. He put sequence and priority into the halachic world. He restored his Mazda Torah. He restored the halacha to a certain level which began to resemble what it was with Rabbi Akiva. That's the godless of the Rambam. He tried to do the same thing with Hashkafa, but he didn't have the Kabbalah, but he knew where to look for the Mafteach, which is in Greek metaphysics. You see, all of these things are mysteries to you. They all sound like weird stories, but there's something going on right underneath your nose that you have no idea what these men are doing and how they know this. But you see, they fit into the entire history. From Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe ad Moshe lekam Moshe, because from Moshe Rabbeinu, who had the Torah in B'tzuz HaKesser, the Torah in the form of Seder, of the Nun, that never appeared again until the Rambam in the Mishnah Torah. That's the real meaning of Moshe ad Moshe lekam Moshe. That he restored the Torah again to some extent what the Nun is. Not the Nun, of course. That's a whole different ballgame. But on some way, he began to move Torah back, and then the Torah came along, who did the same thing in Halach L'Maisa. So a new approach suddenly came up. It was called, the Mechabrim, the Rambam, the Torah, and so on. And then later on, you have, the different Shulchan Aruch, the Beis Yosef. But suddenly they started to collect the halachas and compendiums that is devoid of who said it. It was no longer a literary analysis. It became much closer to Chokhmah as a phenomenological analysis, in terms of the analysis of the halach itself, regardless who said it, and so on. So they are restoring a certain awe that never existed because the Shekhinah is in Golus. That's who these people were. The Rambam is not simply a sefer you put off the shelf called the Mishnah Torah to see what the halach is. Much greater in the history of Torah and Klal Yisrael. It has an incredible power and value. You need to appreciate what a Rambam. Now you see why the Banishim was so mad, because they burnt the Mor Nevuchim. And he was mad at Rishonim, Rabbi Yoina, and Rabbi Shimon ben Ahor. It's like, you want to play with this? Do you have any idea who the Rambam was? So Rabbi Yoina finally got it. He didn't understand what a Rambam was. As big as Rabbi Yoina was, Megundi, he did not chap what a Rambam was, what he was doing. That the Rambam was a tzaddik gomer, not only tzaddik gomer, the Rambam of anyone, because he was a doctor and a physician. And so, and he understood the chokhmah of the goyim at a certain level. The Rambam understood what Torah is supposed to look like. He just couldn't do it. He didn't have all the equipment. But at least he began to understand what Torah Shlema looks like. The printing press was discovered at the same time. Also, Johannes Gutenberg built the printing press. The printing press, the Torah was freed from scribes. It was freed from Seifim. Now they can publish a sefer, and for the first time Torah can now be presented in a school in the form of 300 textbooks. Suddenly Torah could be printed in a way which can become an educational textbook. It wasn't enough to have a Gemara which was written for Poskim and you could never use it as a textbook. Now it's possible to start to make textbooks. It was like a whole new world developed in the 12th, 13th century. Why? Because it was the beginning of the Elef HaShishi, the 6,000th year, which is the Erev Shabbos of Elef HaShvi, and so which is the Yemais Mashiach. So suddenly, everything which was missing from the time of the Tanoim to the time of what? Of the Rambam, suddenly started coming out. Now, you would never connect these things, but they're all connected. You would never connect the finding of the Zohar to the writing of the Mishnah Torah, to the thing of the printing press. You would see you have no concept of the connection of these things. But what it means is that the Torah is, in a certain sense, is leaving a golus. The Shekhinah is coming out. And the Nun slowly is opening up the door to its tomb and its kever. Science, the ability to take Chokhmah and apply it in its greatest area. Since the Nun, the only time Chokhmah was used in unbelievable effectiveness is science. Who was the first scientist, really? Well, you had Archimedes, but that Chokhmah was lost 1,000 years ago. Who happened? The scientific method was discovered, I doubt if anyone, by a man called Roger Bacon, who was a monk in England.
Francis Bacon.
What?
Francis Bacon.
No, Roger Bacon. Francis Bacon was a little bit later. I know, everyone thinks, oh, bacon and eggs, no. It's Roger Bacon, who was a monk. Roger Bacon was a monk, and he was the first one that started to experiment. The first one who opened up the actual method to obtain the Chokhmah of physical reality was Roger Bacon. And then from Roger Bacon there was Galileo, who really did, and Isaac Newton, who applied mathematics. Science exploded from the 1300s and on. You notice what's called it's called synchronicity. At the same time in history, all kinds of things are happening, and so on. Finally, for Jews and so on, something else and so on. They rediscovered Aristotle. They rediscovered Aristotle's works. You know what that means? The mafteach and the science of existence and the ability to examine existence itself. So suddenly you could begin to understand some concept of Kabbalah on some level suddenly was rediscovered. And when it was so discovered, he was so powerful, Aristotle, that all three religions at the time had to sit down to defend themselves. The Muslims, they wrote several books and so on, very tremendous Chacham that the Rambam used. Avicenna, Ibn Sina, Avicenna Al-Farabi, and so on. These were tremendous Islamic, they were Arab philosophers that started to write a Pirush in Aristotle. So what happened? They defended Islam against Aristotle. The Christians started with Thomas Aquinas and Duns Scotus. They also felt a threat, the Christian theology, from Aristotle, and they had to write a book. Thomas Aquinas wrote the Summa Theologica. He defended Christianity against Aristotle. And then finally the Rambam wrote the Mon Ruchim to defend Judaism against that. Of course, the Rambam was the first or the second. The Christians took the stuff from the Rambam. They just copied the Rambam, whatever the story is, and so on. Well, that's typical. But the fundamental thing is simply this. When Aristotle appears, he is a threat. He is a threat to all established religions. Why? Because the man had the mind of a Tana. You could not ignore this guy. Yeah, he was a min. He believed that there's a God, but that God is synonymous with the universe, and it was always there, that the universe was never created. It always existed. Okay, but his ability to understand the nature of existence and so on was unparalleled. So remember there's a period before Kabbalah called the Mechkerim of Sadja, the Rambam, then Chazda ibn Kreskas. You ever hear these names? The Ralbag. All these guys were called the Mechkerim, or the philosophers, not the Mukabbalim. They appeared at the same time that Aristotle was rediscovered, and so on. But it's curious that Aristotle is rediscovered when the Zohar appears. Very strange. It was lost at the same time as the Zohar, and it reappears at the same time. Like, what is this? It's almost like a twin of some sort. Because we see that the Rabbanishim is moving history in a certain direction. That's what we see. Finally, which is fantastic news. Remember I said that the purpose of Christianity was to give a tahara to Jews, to Klal Yisrael, because of the sinas chinam, by Christian anti-Semitism exerting hatred against the Jew, for no reason at all. The Christian hates the Jew, sinas chinam. To be machaper on the Jew hating another Jew, sinas chinam. What's Christianity? That's Catholicism. At the same time as Aristotle appears in the Zohar, and all of these things are going on, suddenly something happens to Catholicism. For 700 years, Catholicism, the Pope was absolute ruler of Christianity and of Europe. It was a tremendous power. And because of that power, the Jews sitted the Crusades, the Inquisition, and pogrom. Why? Because the Pope was an absolute ruler. Something strange happened. Suddenly, at the appearance of science and so on and so forth, Catholicism lost its absolute power, and it split into what's called the Protestant Reformation. For the first time, the power of the Catholic Church was broken, and even though it lasted further and further, its absolute power was never regained again. The Protestants took over with the Reformation, with Martin Luther and Calvin and so on and so forth. You see, why? Because you see, as you go into the Elav Hashishi and we begin to approach the Geula, Esav has to lose its ability to be Matar Yaakov, because Yaakov or the Jews already have a kapor, they already atoned for the sinas chinam. Catholicism wreaked such a damage on Jews that it gave them a tremendous tahara and so on. So we don't need that level. So the Banasham weakened Catholicism through the Protestant Reformation and the rise of what's called the Renaissance and the Enlightenment by suddenly, and I told you, when logic and science and philosophy came into the world, Christianity started to drop because they can't handle it. It doesn't make these religions that make no... Christianity appeals to what? It appeals to faith. It appeals to emotions. It's corrupt. It's completely illogical. It appeals only when there's no Chokhmah in the world. And the rise of Chokhmah started to see the rise. And finally, the last thing which appears at that time, which is unbelievable, was this. The ultimate complete tahara of Esav. Esav stopped hating Jews. You know when? Or not openly. By the Declaration of Independence. Democracy destroyed the terror or the sikh of Esav. Because once you separated church and state, no longer could the state sponsor pogrom or an inquisition or crusade. You see, democracy, which is the beginning of Esav becoming a shtik tzaddik ben adam chavero, appears in 1776 with the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. But when did democracy first appear? You see, you think it started with America. It didn't. It started with what's called the Magna Carta. Did anyone ever read the Magna Carta? The Magna Carta is when the British, when the lords, the feudal lords of Britain opposed the rule of the king. They broke the absolute power of the king. So this is what happened. The Pope had absolute power, it was broken. The king had absolute power, it was broken. And then finally with America, America breaks the absolute power of the state. So no longer do you have any kind of real institution that can kill Jews in the way they did. Now you notice that? You notice when all this is going on at the same time, there's a tahara of Esav. The Jews no longer need such an atonement anymore. And as that's happening and the sinas chinim is being lightened, suddenly what breaks through? Chochmah, Kabbalah, Halacha, everything suddenly comes to, it's like a tchias hamesim. It's a resurrection of the dead. You see it. What existed in the time of Tanoim, you see it, died for 1,000 years and then suddenly came alive again. But you see, there's a tremendous seder. There's a tremendous thing going on with everything fits with everything else. It's not stam. Warm's done.
Are you going to explain Germany?
What's that?
Are you going to explain the Nazis?
No, I'm not going to do that.
Why isn't it Esav? Isn't it the final part of it?
I'm not, it's a whole I'm not going to go there. It's a gula, it's on something else. What's the problem today? Okay. Do we have the 50th gate? No. Why not? Because the Zohar is written mashal, okay, and so on. Now, it's interesting. There's a major problem. The Zohar writes, Rabbi Shimon writes, that with the information in this book, the Gula will come. That's what Rabbi Shimon writes. The Zohar is around for 700 years and there is no Gula. What is Rabbi Shimon talking about? The answer is simple. What Rabbi Shimon meant is that when the mashal of this sefer is turned into the nimshal, that's the Gula, because that's the Nun Sharabina. And the ultimate one who will do that is the Mashiach. But the one who does it started is the Ramchal. The godless of the Ramchal says that there were 3 great lights that came to the world when it comes to Hashkafa. Rabbi Shimon, who saved the 50th gate from Rabbi Akiva and put it in the mashal. The Ari, who expanded the Zohar in the form of the mashal. Okay, and the Ramchal. And the Ramchal writes, I was the only one in Shemayim who was given the permission to begin to explore the Nimshal. The Kuf Lameches Pisach Chama is the beginning of the Nimshal, to examine that. So Ramchal writes that, and so on in that sense. So you see that he is the only one. Even the thing with Hasidus and the Baal Shem. I don't know if you know, but Hasid, the Baal Shem once wrote a letter to his brother-in-law. Maybe you know the story. He wrote a letter, wrote to Rabbi Geshen Kitova, that one day he said certain Yehudim and he went up to the Shemayim into the yeshiva of the Mashiach. That's what he said. And he went to the Mashiach and says, when are you coming? So the Mashiach said, when your Torah, which is Hasidus, envelops the world, that's when I'm coming. Which means that when Hasidus is Matzliach, that's the time. Well, Hasidus is Matzliach. But to see to it that happened, the Baal Shem Tov did a Moed Zach. What he did was, he started to popularize Kabbalah. Whereas the Ashkenazim or the Litvisher were completely into Gemara and so on and so forth, the Hasidim started to learn Kabbalah in its form and they incorporated in the Tefillah, in the Avodah. So what they really did was they took the Kabbalah Sari and they made it part of Halacha. That's what the Baal Shem Tov. Why? Because he realized, when the Mashiach, he realized that his Hasidus is going to bring the Geula. My question is, what is the Mashiach talking about? Hasidus is around what, for 300 years? I don't see hide nor hair of a Mashiach. And the answer is, what? Because again, what's the problem? The Kabbalah of the Baal Shem Tov in all this form is all Mishalom, fundamentally. It's still Mashal. No one has ever broken the concept of the Nimshal. No one. Who breaks that? The Mashiach. The Mashiach does exactly what Rabbi Akiva did. Okay? using certain chokhmah, certain maftechas, he goes into the Torah itself and withdraws the pardes. Just like Rabbi Kiva did. And he's able to break through and bring out the nun sharim bina into what's called the perfect nimshal. So in the end it's true. From the Zohar will come the Gula and so on. But only in the form of the nimshal. The Mashiach is Magzis da Torah Yoshna. He restores the crown. What crown? What is the crown of Torah? Chokhmah. The ability to examine the events of reality in terms of its phenomena. The ability, what's that?
The crown of the letters.
What?
The crown of the letters.
Yeah, well, or the chokhmah on the tagin, right, and so on. But in more, and so on and so forth, in terms of that, and so on. The Mashiach also restores all the halachas. You know, the instant question, how is the Mashiach going to restore all the halachas and completely eliminate all stakes? Look, I hate to say this, but when the Mashiach comes, the Gemara is out of business. Because the Mashiach, there's no suffix anymore. There's no machlokes. The what machlokes? It's ridiculous. The chesroinus of Gemara that we have because of the choshech is gone. And what happens? Suddenly, we know every halacha exactly, plus the understanding of every halacha. How does the Mashiach restore halacha? How? It's an interesting question. How does he do it? So I believe, I have a theory in fundamentally, I think how he does it. What's that? Yeah.
No. Is the Malach on
Tekel, but it's the Mashiach with the Nun that restores the halacha to Klal Yisrael. And so on. And the only answer is Tekel, whatever story. It's the Mashiach himself. How does he do that? So the interesting thing is this, and it's a very thing. What is all halacha? Halacha is nothing more than the performance of the Tayyag mitzvahs. That's all it is. How do you perform the 630 mitzvahs? That's what halacha is. But if you examine this concept of mitzvahs, what are tayyag mitzvahs? Tayyag mitzvahs are there to masaken the tayyag evorim, or the spiritual organs in the neshama. Every mitzvah corresponds to a different spiritual organ, and so on. So here's the point, that once the Mashiach opens up the nimshal, understands exactly every aspect of the human body and so on, he will understand suddenly what tikkun exists for every eva in the body and every eva in the neshama. From that, he will be able to understand what the halachas are that apply to that eva. In other words, he's coming from the nimshal out. You see it. He's coming from what's called the chitzonius thing, the pnimius Torah, from the pnimius Torah to understand the nature of existence, the nature of all the evom and diagnosis. He can recapture fundamentally all the halachas without a suffix. It's all coming from what's called the nun sharei bina. Again, we have the same concept. Now, finally, what happened? It says hamarze shchinotzu l'tzion. What does Sion mean? I'm not talking about Zionism. What is Sion? What's Sion? Sion is a madrega of the Shechina. When the Shechina leaves Golus, we call it Sion. Hamarze shchinotzu l'tzion. The Shechina is a matzav, in what he called Sion, is matzav in the Shechina. In that matzav, it says what? Or chodesh al Sion Torah. When the Shechina is out of the klipa, when the Torah now is united with its chokhmah, so that you have what's called a true phenomenological analysis of all existence and so on. That's the concept of Tzion. Okay, and that's when it says Umid Tzion Teitzi Torah. Why? Because the Torah that it's talking about that comes from Tzion is the Nun Sharei Bina, which is a whole different ballgame that finally comes out. Finally, what's our avodah? Again, the Torah that you study is absolutely Kaddish. It is. Relative to what you need. Because we are on such a low madrega, okay? You know, we're like Hanina ben Doisa, who lived from one week to another on Carib. The Torah that we have is like an Aeneas. But you know something? It's all we have. And therefore, it's what gives us a certain muknias. But relative to what the Torah really is, relative to what Klal Yisrael really deserves, it's like Hevel Havolim. Hevel Havolim. And Taka the Rebbe says, Hevel Havolim, the Torah of the Mashiach connected the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, in the second Luchas, connected the Torah of Mashiach is Hevel Havolim. That's unbelievable. Because the Torah in its two tzur has Teferes and Oiz, Torah and Chochmah. And that's what's so critical and so on. What contribution can we make? Simple. What drove the Shekhinah into Golus? What drove the Torah into Golus so that it's fragmented and there's no Chochmah in it in the sense that we can see? Sinas Chinam. You want to restore the Torah? You want to bring it back to what's called its Shlemus? It's what Torah B'tzuzah Kesser. That's what you want to do. Be careful on your Lashon Hara and your Achdus to your Chaverim. Your Lashon Hara, your Rechilis, okay? Your Kinah and your jealousy and your Kaas against another Yid, that's what fractures Klal Yisrael. That fractures the Torah itself. So therefore, the Gula must start with us. This is not a coincidence. The reason why the Aguda Achas, the reason why Rabbi Akiva failed fundamentally, because there was Sinas Chinim. Chazal said it'll never happen. There's too much Sinas Chinim, and if you have Sinas Chinim amongst Yidden, there's no Shaykhis for the Nun Shai Rabbina to have a Gilui or a revelation. It starts with us. You want to know what you can do? So therefore, every Jew today has two responsibilities. One, you need to learn Shas and Gemara to the best of your ability, because that's all you have. But try and learn Gemara and Halacha in its most Mesudic form. The Mishnah Torah and so on, and the collections, that's a Masada, the whole thing. Try and learn it as Mesuda as you can. That's one. Number two, that's to work for the present. Number two, work for the future. Watch yourself on your Bein Adam Chaveroi, and slowly you will glue and mend the Torah of the Nun itself. Gradually, it comes together in the exact same madrega as Klal Yisrael. As Klal Yisrael becomes an Aguda Achas, the Torah becomes Aguda Achas. Zeh luma zeh. And that's our Yeshua and that's our Tikvah. Learn Torah the way it is now to the best of your ability. But remember, this is Anius, and you are responsible for its position. Do whatever you can to create Torahs and Aguda Achas in Torah itself, and you will be Mamish Messiah, the Mashiach, in terms of bringing the Gula. Let's hope that the Ramchal, that we finish the job of the Ramchal, and we begin to understand one day not the mashal, that with the zinin of Yesh Mugda Mamucha b'Torah, and we see the Shidduch. The Chosin is the Torah, the Kal is Chochmah, and that's the Gula itself. Thank you.
Go ahead. I have to tell you. Anybody in the community about bringing it finally do I just pack out of town right now. It's over. Skaya comes from the Skaya. Who was Plato, by the way?
He's the Rebbe of Faust.
Why doesn't he get play?
He does, I just don't want to know. How much do you have to know?
I mean,
Look, I'm doing it for 2.5 hours. I'm oyster money. Interesting. You're shocking. We go to Rammon's machine. Okay. Who writes that? Vision.
Why do the song basic? It's to get his credit from.
That's a whole different issue.
I mean, he's like a whole new level. He's like his own. He's a new
Whenever the Gula appears, I'm going to others. Matan Torah, Purim, Gula, Eretz Yisrael.
Before the goal, he has to come again, Molly.
Who?
Molly gets to come one more time.
It's his last appearance. World War II was his last appearance.
Oh, right there. Good. But the goal's not here.
I wasn't. Not even 100 years yet since one of the
All right.
100 years in history is not a lot.
Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim,